Welcome everybody to episode 41 of ADS. Thank you everybody for joining us live, and we have a fantastic show this week. We have an amazing guest who I just want to say I really appreciate you joining us, Venus Theory, and you may know him from the video game Avowed as the composer. We have NextGenNero co-host and Soul as usual co-host. So we're gonna kick into what everyone's been up to, and then we're gonna start off the show. So I'm gonna throw to our guest first. What have you been up to this week? How are you? And thank you so much for joining us. I've been listening to the soundtrack, and I edited it so that I could the game, so I could actually have more music and less of some of the other game sounds, so I could really pay attention to the music. But yeah, how are you? What have you been playing?
Thanks for having me. Let's see. What have I been playing? Not much. I got my new planner notebook in, so that's been exciting. And then I've been answering emails, editing videos, and doing some sound design work. So that's about it. And then I did just buy Scum a couple weeks ago and set up a server with my friend, but I have had absolutely no time to actually play it. So we'll see how that goes, I guess, when I actually have time to play games again.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. It's hard trying to fit everything in to find time to game. And I know that you've played probably Avowed so much anyway.
Oh yeah.
I am listening to it as you had to create the soundtrack and create the music to coincide with every aspect of the game. So you've probably played Avowed more than all of us combined, actually.
If memory serves, I had close to 200 hours in the dev build. That was, I don't remember when I started, early last year, whenever I got really going on the game. So it was a lot of, at first, playing the game just to understand it and the story and the characters and all that stuff. And then after that, it was just brutal amounts of play testing and making sure the music was behaving the way that it should, or it was fitting in context with the gameplay and stuff. And so it was a lot of playing the same sections of the game and listening to the same 5 conversations over and over again, but pulled across 200 total hours. So I've played a lot of Avowed, but I've only played little chunks of the game over and over and over and over
again. You didn't have nightmares, I hope.
The conversation in the prologue with Garrick, where you first wake up on the beach, I see that in my nightmares.
Wow. Fair enough.
That was the first one where we did all of the testing for the initial music system was in the prologue, because that was the first section of the game I wrote music for. So it was just that same wake up on the conversation or wake up on the beach conversation. It's just God damn it. Hello, Garrick. How you doing? All right. What's your name? I'm the envoy. Where are we going? What's going on?
The mystery is gone. All right. Very quickly, I'm going to throw to Nero. What have you been up to? What have you been playing? I know we have this super chat if you want to quickly read it out.
Yeah, shout out to Richard Harmon. He said, "I lost the bet, you win." Thank you for the $25. I assume this is directed for you, Venus.
I think they were taking bets in my Discord if my screen was going to be all weird and widescreen again, because I got an ultra wide monitor and I tried streaming earlier this week or last week or something like that, and I had to stream in ultra wide because I couldn't figure out how to make it not ultra wide.
What were you streaming on? Was it OBS or something?
Yeah, OBS and just direct into YouTube. But I
think if it's either holding Shift or Alt, you can adjust your
tried
size of your window.
It down, and then I tried the canvas resizing in OBS, and then it just squished everything all weird. And then I watched.
I'm trying to remember
if it's the live stream, and then I watched probably 30 minutes of different YouTube tutorials explaining how to make it not ultra wide, and I was like, never mind. We're just going to stream it ultra wide.
We're just going to go with it. I'm going to go with it.
Yeah.
All good. Well, Nero, what have you been up to? What have you been playing? Glad to have you back this week, and I'm glad to hear that you're better than you were last week.
Definitely. So, yeah. Good to be back, man. Happy to be here with the panel. Appreciate everybody in the chat, all of our supporters, man. Man, I just been playing a lot of Avowed and some Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Two of two goated RPGs. You know, you have the medieval fantasy aspect, and then you have the more realistic sim version. So, man, Avowed got my hooks in, man. I've been playing Evil. You know, we spoke about it just a little bit before we, you know, went live. And me, once I commit to a play style, I kind of stick to it, man. So I made some decisions, and I heard some people around me, and just had a fantastic time, man. So starting a new playthrough, and this time I want to be, you know, a scholar type of build, you know, mage, because my first playthrough was with the ranger, so I had the ranger build going, and I love that you can just swap your weapons with Y to your different builds. So I had the ranger going, and then in the other hand I had a sword and a pistol. So with that build, man, I couldn't help but to be evil. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't help but to be bad and just run around,
Swashbuckler.
and
So
the
try hard.
freedom was just absolutely amazing, man, as far as the combat and just being able to just be a menace, man. And I love that. You know, the more I kept saying, like, yo, how much worse can I be? Like, can I be a bigger scumbag than what I was in the previous section? And due to that, I got locked off from some things, and I really love that aspect as well. You know, people got mad at me, and it's an achievement. Eventually, if you play evil like me, you'll know, and it's called Nobody Likes That. So but that's the Obsidian that I know and love, man, because I absolutely love the Outer Worlds, and that game had me in a trance similar to this game because I was just able to be myself. You know, I love when games give you the range to be good. Like, you know, I'm always have a good build, a good run in the end, you know, but how bad can I be? Who can I piss off? You know, so Obsidian has always done that well, man, even dating back to New Vegas. So I loved it. And shout out to Venus Theory. I appreciate you being here because the music had me in a trance a lot of the times as well. Like, seriously, whether it was hunting down the bounties or just exploration or even just chilling at the campfire, you know, getting some of my armor right. Or, you know, I don't, you know, this will be one of the questions later, but shout out to Xbox because quick resume, I don't really have to load up new things often. I'm always right where I left off at. So if I go play something else or if I'm, you know, turning my Xbox off for a day or two, but the one or two times where I did get an update and I had to start over, even the menu music had me in a trance. So shout out to you, man. Absolutely beautiful sound, beautiful game. But that's what I've been playing, man. Avowed and KCD2.
Yeah. Thank you, Neri. Thank you, Neri. I just want to say thank you to everybody in the chat joining us live. Really appreciate all of you. Soul, how have you been? What have you been up to this week?
Hey, you know, I have been great. Life is good. No complaints here. You know, as I like to say, everything is everything. You know, just want to also thank Venus Theory for dropping in and blessing us with his presence. My man, you have, for what I have experienced in the game, because I listened to the soundtrack over and over and over and over again. You know, I really wanted to kind of absorb that. So I have the aha moments when certain, you know, tracks are playing. And I'm like, that's it. There it is. That's the one I've been waiting for. So, you know, when I'm having these moments right now, I'm like, this is really dope. So, kind of getting the soundtrack ahead of time and getting into it has been really, really good. Shout out to Mav. I just saw Dallas's own Mav is in the house. Thank you for dropping in. Lyric Punti, Lord Roughness, Becca, there's a bunch of you guys in there. Try hard. Thank you guys for always dropping in. Promise we're going to have a really good show for you with our special guest here today. But really, I have been all about Avowed right now, and I am absolutely loving it. I mean, I really literally just got a little short session in right before running downstairs to jump on and everything. And I just find myself not wanting to play anything else. I'm kind of you know, kind of like with blinders on when I play games, especially games like this, because this is an what I call a nook and cranny game. I'm
Yeah.
searching for everything. I don't know how many times I've fallen to my death because I'm like, I can get around the corner. There's something over there. There's
Yeah,
something
it's a
over
game of
there.
very calculated jumps.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it's very calculated, whether it is in third person or in first person. It's very calculated. And, you know, I'm listening and I'm like, I can hear something. Something's kind of glimmering,
Yeah, they
glistening.
did a
over
good
there.
job with that. Where like you're far enough away to where you can't confirm that anything is over there, but you hear like the
You can
little
hear it.
tinkly, sparkly things, and you're like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, I'm gonna jump,"
Yeah.
and then you
I'm
fall
gonna
down.
Yeah.
go
And
for
you're like,
this.
"Okay."
And then,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
It's that
Avowed has
Leroy
been,
Jenkins moment where you just run in and just like,
yeah.
fuck shit up.
Right. So no, I mean, I know a bulk of our conversation is really going to be about Avowed and our experience so far. So that is all that I have been playing since it dropped in early release. I don't want to load up anything else because this has been a great experience in both third and first person. And chat, Panda, Nero, I might be playing 70-30 in first person.
Knew it.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
the
I
it's the
cannot believe
combat,
it.
right? It's the combat.
Look, combat in
Because
first,
it is,
exploration in third. That's the rules.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Because
Thinking back to the Skyrim Fallout days.
for me, the combat has been buttery smooth in
Yes.
first person. And I'm not saying it's not smooth in third. It is buttery smooth in first person. And I am absolute, like, I feel like I wreck shop in first person, but in third person, I feel like, man, I'm getting my ass kicked here. What am I doing wrong? I'm like fumbling through everything. And I'm like, no, let me switch back, So, man, that's been great. So I didn't want to tell on myself, but I've actually been enjoying this in first person. And yeah. It's been awesome. But I am ready to get into things. But Panda, come on, babe. What have you been up to? What are you playing
I think we
outside
all
of
know the answer to
Avowed?
this. If you are friends with me on Xbox, well, yeah, you will just see that I have been on Avowed nonstop since early release. I got it as soon as I could get access to it, but it was available 7 a.m. my time, but on a Friday morning, and I'm like, I have to work. What is this? Why? What is this adulting life? And then as soon as I created my character, turned the game off, and then jumped on right after work, and I've been playing it nonstop since. So I'm over 65 hours. I actually think I'm about 75 hours in the game. Got to the 4th section, and the game. We talked about it last week. It's stunning. It has its hooks in me, and it's one of those games where I just can't step away from it. Like when I played Breath of the Wild or any other game where they just allow open exploration within the area that you're in. You just look at something, you're like, I'm going to go have a nosy at there, over here, and then you see like a chest somewhere, and you're like, I'm going to go there, and then you're like, I did like a whole loop of the current map that I'm in, of the edge of the map, and forgot that I could go through because I kept seeing something else and going somewhere else, and it's just, it's a good game when they've got the exploration right, and you don't feel like you need to mainline story because you're having too much fun just exploring what they've done. I think most people who are playing this game who like to explore everything are just trying to see if there's a way to get up here and how to get there and looking for ways to explore. And I know when they were talking about the game initially, they were like, it's a game where we want you to look up or look down or like really just don't just focus on what's right in front of you. Because you could be missing out on something. And there would be areas where I thought I've explored, but then I'd go a different way and I'm like, I missed this chest the first time. How did I miss this chest? Finding all the star metal has been interesting as well. I found 3 bits. I don't know how many bits of star metal there actually is in the game, but I found 3 pieces so far. Still have to get to the place which allows me to use it. But yeah, I'm loving it, and I will be playing it after the show. I'm trying to finish it. My first playthrough because I've been playing good, but I haven't been playing anything else. I'll just be real honest. I haven't had time because I haven't. Avowed's taken all my time. I'm pretty sure my cat is like, you're neglecting me. Not that bad, but he has been playing Avowed with me. But yeah, it's been fantastic. Last week and a bit of just playing an RPG from Obsidian. I love their games. I love their content. I love their trailers. Actually, their trailers they never take themselves too seriously. Like the characters in this game are well written, especially Yatsley. Like, she is just such an interesting character. Some of the things she says, and I was like, I was not expecting that. And I got through a decision. If you're in the Community Game Nights Discord, you will know that I said, like, there's a decision where they're like, there's no choice but to try and just be the lesser of two evils. Like, it's not a good choice no matter which way you play it. But yeah. Yeah. I, like everyone else, Nero and Soul, have been thoroughly immersed in Avowed and the music that complements Avowed. And even that starting the title screen, where you're just listening to that song kind of build in hype. It has it's been a I think for me just a confirming experience for like the reason why I go back and replay games. Part of it is the story, part of it is the character in laws, but a lot of it is the music. Like, if I go look at my Spotify, I have so many just songs from video games.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, now I need to go play that video game. So yeah, just such a good vibe, good time. And just want to say a big thank you again, Venus Theory, for joining us. And to our chat, whether you're watching us live on YouTube, whether you're watching us on X or on Twitch, really appreciate each and every one of you who show up every week and make our day extra fun. All right. Did we want to do quick topics, or are we ready just to go straight into? I feel like just asking you 1,500 questions around Avowed.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't mind going straight into it.
I'm
personally.
ready to jump in. Yeah.
Well, you were the first one I feel like who put questions down. Is there a question, Nero, that you specifically want to ask, or do we want to just, Venus, is there anything you want to specifically talk about before we ask any pointed questions? Not that pointed, but very specific.
I'm good to get it. I'm mostly interested in what you guys want to know about, because I feel like I've just
All right,
experienced this game to death, and I haven't touched it since, really, other than when I streamed, whenever I streamed like a week ago or so. But I'm looking forward to probably about a month of breather room before I go in and play the game again, because I just need to like not touch it for a while so that I can just go back and kind of experience it at surface value, instead of sitting there going like, I could have done something there, like, oh, that would have been better if I did this.
That's a really good point.
I have a question that's not a question for Venus here. And it's really about my experience when I first encountered, it's Yatsley, right?
Yatsley.
Okay. Did anyone else have a situation where right before you kind of left, well, I don't want to spoil, but let's just say you meet and then you leave. Right before you leave, there's some dialogue. Did anyone else have Kai say something inappropriate before you guys left her?
Are you talking about an Emerald Sphere?
A specific spot, but I do know that she is very flirtatious. Like I heard him at camp say a few things, and
there were some things being said, right? And you had just retrieved a little deal. Well, in my experience, for her. And so, you were trying to tie some things up. We're like, yo, we're about to go ahead and go talk to somebody. And she, had a little conversation for you. And then all of a sudden, Kai, he just says, this is inappropriate. So here we go. He says, yeah, I have some inches for her. I was like, did he
yes, I remember that. Yeah.
But he had some inches for her. What in the hell? Oh my gosh. So now I'm over here like, what is Kai on? I mean, Fish Guy, what are we doing? So I didn't know if this was like a
Garrus?
specific deal.
It's always going to be Garrus from Mass Effect.
Okay. I will say this: hearing him just felt so good, and to me, like, before I get into my questions for Venus, man, because I got a couple good ones for you, but for me, hearing him, I was just like, yo, immediately I was biased, right? Panda, like, yo, that's Garrus forever for me as well, right? But the fact that I came into Giada and the other one, the other lady, I immediately got them because I needed Giada for a healer. You know, I'm like, yo, I'm being evil. I need somebody to have my back because I'm trying to fight everybody. I'm talking spicy. I'm being a hole. So I ended up going with them. So on this new playthrough, I'm gonna have to force myself to play with Kai because I love that voice. I love him. Like that, a great performance here as well too. But I did not expect for him not to be on my side for my first playthrough as much as he was. So, but I did hear what you asked. That the inches, I do specifically remember him saying something about
Okay.
inches, man.
Okay.
Uh,
I was like,
I
wow,
love his
that's
attitude in
wild.
this game, man. I love his style in general, man. Kai is a great companion, man. I love all the companions in the game, and that's why I say it's a lot of replayability because I can see myself having a playthrough where I just focus on having a deep bond with each one of them. You know, they got their
Mm.
side quests and stuff as well. So that was really dope. Now Venus, for the first question, I just want to highlight, like, for me, soundtracks and video games is very, like, I love music. So music, and I love video games. So when I have a video game where it's a good soundtrack, whether it's a horror game, something like let's say Dead Space or Alan Wake 2 recently is just, to me, really great. Hellblade 2, even some indie games. I played Cocoon recently and Jasant.
Hmm.
Those is really good as well.
Yeah.
So I love soundtracks and video games, and I just want to say thank you and congratulations because the sound in this game all around, not only to you but to the entire team, from the sound, from hitting, the cast spells, the water, swimming, and I don't want to go on a tangent, but y'all got the most, in my opinion, one of the most impressive Unreal Engine 5 games out, period. I played in balance mode, just seeing the lumen reflections, the nanite, the lumen, and to get all of that running, and especially have the option for 60 and everything like that. That's just a huge congrats to the entire team. The optimization is huge, and y'all got underwater right in Unreal Engine 5. Like, can somebody point me to another UE5 game on this scope that you could just swim and go underwater? Like,
Oh, it's
the
seamless,
vibe,
right?
the vibe
Hmm.
in this game is amazing. So congrats on the launch. It's amazing. I'm happy to have the early access. I hope it is some DLC down the line. But my first question to you is simple. What are your two favorite video game soundtracks?
Two
Can you nail it
favorite
down
video
to
game
two?
soundtracks. Yeah. Man, I think I've really been enjoying the open world music of Red Dead Redemption 2 lately, just because I love the interactivity to it. And then Dying Light 2, I've been really into as well. But
Nice.
not necessarily just for the music. Like, the music is really good in it, but I'm really into the music interactivity in Dying Light 2 because I think that is one of the only games, at least recently, that has just impressed me so much with pushing where game music can go as a medium. And I don't think enough games really take advantage of that. It's probably due to like time and budget constraints mostly, but yeah, Dying Light 2 is extremely impressive. And then I think, yeah, Red Dead 2, I just think has good open world little bits and whatever, because it's very sparse and I enjoy that quite a bit. But naturally, I think just in terms of like ones I listen to over and over, uh, probably Fallout 3. Really,
Mm,
really loved that soundtrack, but
okay.
I have just a disgusting amount of hours in Fallout 3. So that's probably why. And then I don't know, Battlefield 2042. That's just like
Okay.
everyone
Okay.
hated that soundtrack and I loved it. I was just like, this is a vibe. I love it. I'm here for it. But yeah, a lot of people hated the Battlefield 2042 one.
All right. I ain't gonna lie, the Battlefield 2042 one caught me off guard, and Panda and Soul, I would love to hear you guys as well. And guys in the chat, let us know your favorite few. But for me personally, I gotta immediately go to Skyrim.
Mm.
Skyrim music to me, just all around, wow, perfection, just warm, cozy feeling. Recently, I gotta tip my hat because um I listened to the soundtrack for Avowed on Apple Music as well. So I went there because I wanted to really listen to it outside of the combat, because when the music is so good in video games, and it might just be me, might just be my ADHD gamer in my brain, but I tend to get in a trance where I'm like, so I'm really in that world. And I can only be in that world if everything comes together. And that's the atmosphere, the music, the graphics, just the feel, the characters. everything in that package have to come together for me to be in a trance. So more recently, I want to throw in Avowed. I love this soundtrack, and Death Stranding as well.
Mm.
I ended up downloading the Death Stranding soundtrack. Kojima, sheesh, I'm trying to work through that as well, guys. Because Death Stranding 2, I'm really intrigued. So that's another good soundtrack. Um, I, but I don't want to keep naming Bethesda games, but I do love Fallout. That Vegas feel, just when you're exploring the radio stations and pretty
To
much all the
say
Fallout
Vegas,
stuff.
that's Obsidian.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, excuse me, Obsidian, but because I was gonna say Starfield as well, and
Yes,
so that
Starfield.
I kind of got
Yep.
a taste, but yeah, music is just awesome, man, and video games, and it's nice to have the inside of it. So to hear you name the few games that you named was definitely interesting. Especially Fallout 3, man. Hopefully that it's a rumored Oblivion remaster coming, and it's a rumored Fallout 3 remaster remake. Hopefully those become true, because I feel like it's a lot of remakes and remasters going on in the industry, and I feel like if there's anybody that can benefit from bringing some of their older games and catalogs up to date, it's Xbox and Microsoft. I feel like they don't really have a lot of remakes or remasters. They're mostly all generation putting out new games
Well,
and
I
new
feel like
experiences.
for anyone to spend the amount of hours some of us gamers spend in one IP or one game, you have to have music that people are comfortable just listening to in the background and vibe with. And some of the music over the years has been just game changing. Like, I have the original Overworld Zelda music on my phone as my ringtone, and it's just something about that. And if you go and listen to all the Zelda games later and such, like their big tentpole titles that they've always got a bit of what that original soundtrack was kind of in there, a little bit of that
Yep.
DNA. So Zelda is mine. I can't decide between Mass Effect and Fable. Like the heart-wrenching music in Mass Effect, with what is going on, like juxtaposing like everything else that's happening at that time, and then like just some of the Fable lightheartedness of the music in that game. But it's so distinctive that you could play like a little bit of a line from that, and I would be like, that game instantly, and you just have this recognition for music in a video game, because you've spent so much time in there. Yeah. Soul, sorry. What were your ones?
Well, seeing that Nero finally let us get one in because he took all the damn soundtracks that anybody liked. I mean, I was like,
Hey,
hell.
I got one more. Hey,
can-
Silent Hill 2. That soundtrack
and he still
terrifies me, yo. I
Oh,
never
man.
had a
I'm
soundtrack
like,
that
yo,
actually scares me, yo.
Can we get a word in? I mean, he's just naming all of them. I mean, I'm like, oh, I'm scratching them off like, well, can't mention that. Okay, can't mention that. Well, there is the theme song to Jeopardy. So okay, so here we go. I think that Zelda and Zelda, right? So I am a kid of the well, I'm a 70s baby, but hey, Zelda was good to me when it dropped a long time ago, and it is one of my favorites. And Panda, you're absolutely correct. They always have something that goes back to that original in every game, and I absolutely love that. Zelda, and I don't want to say that's my top, but Metroid Prime, that soundtrack was awesome, and it just takes me to a place. It's like one I will just regularly have playing, kind of like in the background, in my classroom. I always have a little music going on, when the kids are working independently, and I always have some kind of gaming music going on, and that is one of my favorites to have. Most recently, Starfield had a beautiful soundtrack. Absolutely loved it. It just brought me right into the world, and it just made me really feel like I was on this really journey in space. It just kind of harkens back to all of my Star Wars days and my Star Trek, more Star Trek than anything else. Just really made me fall in love with it. And since we're doing like 3 and 4 here, because I was just going to go with Starfield, and this one right here, it made me just really feel like I was in the movies, Harry Potter, the Hogwarts,
Yes. Legacy.
awesome.
Oh,
It was
yes.
awesome. I absolutely loved that one. It literally felt magical. And so those are my two most recent. I give you two new and two old. And those are those are the ones that really take
Did
me.
anyone play the Lord of the Rings games in like the 2000s on like PlayStation 2? Does anyone else remember those? I feel like those had fantastic music that really felt like Lord of the Rings music.
I played like one of them, I feel, and anything Lord of the Rings, like that is where I am. Like I'm in Middle Earth. That's where I live. Like an hour and a half, 2 hour drive away from the Shire, basically.
That's right.
So yeah, they had fantastic music in them. I would agree with you.
And on the Metroid Prime note, I actually have one of the synthesizers over there that was used on Metroid Prime. I bought it because I saw that
Really?
it was like, hey, this thing, like the factory presets were used on the Metroid soundtrack, so I bought one.
Oh,
Yeah.
how dope. That's so cool. Yeah, that is mad cool right there. I love it. I've got my same as my blaster back
Oh yeah.
behind me here. Yeah, so I like to every once in a while just pew pew. So but that's really pew pew. But no, that's really, really cool. Can I jump in with the question? We
Go
good?
for it. Yeah, no, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
here we
you're good.
go. So let me look over here to my notes here. Avowed, it features a dynamic music system. Would you please explain how this system works and how it enhances the player's experience?
Do I have to talk like you when I answer, or
No, you don't, but if you want to, because I noticed that you do have quite a voice yourself, sir.
yeah, so the dynamic system in Avowed, it's not as hyper detailed as I would have liked it to have been, but also I had to make the entire soundtrack in like 8 months.
Okay.
So long story short, in Avowed, the exploration music is a combination of probability systems and kind of different weighting systems of like how often will you hear certain elements within the music, and then volume based triggers. So you've all played the first part of the game, right? Dawn Shore, and you go through the docks, you talk to Kai, and then you probably went to the lighthouse. It was like one of the first things I did. When you get up to that lighthouse, you just instantly, like, all the big orchestra stuff starts happening, and it's like, wow, this is so awesome. So that's an example of a volume based trigger, and that was really, really important to me because during production I actually called it the Skyrim problem, because in Skyrim, it has a great soundtrack and all, but and I'm guessing this is like maybe technical limitations and whatever at the time. When you play it, it is just kind of like the same 4-minute song sort of looping over and over and over, and it's really great. But
Mhm.
there are really big moments in the track now and again, and I always found this just level of ludonarrative dissonance when I'm just kind of hanging out in Whiterun crafting knives to get my smithing skill up over and over and over, and I that just annoyed me to no end. And I always thought, like, okay, in Avowed, you're probably going to do stuff like that where, like Soul, you're just wandering around getting all the chests or like seeing if you can jump over that thing. I don't think during that time we really need like music,
Right.
all the time there. So we had a system in place that has kind of variations on chill versions of things with just like little hints of melody now and again. So it's interesting enough to be there, but the times where the music really does swell up, it's extremely intentional and very warranted by the gameplay. Like, in what you are doing in that moment, the music should feel like what you're thinking in your head. You know, we're like, when we
Right.
see the big vistas or find the hidden area or whatever, that's when music should be like big and important. But other times, if you're just crafting stuff at the camp or whatever, we don't really need like da 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 all the time. Um,
Yeah.
Similarly, in the combat system, combat works kind of based on a threat level system that the studio put together. Basically, every enemy in the game is assigned a certain threat value, and based on what that threat value is, it'll always go into combat. Obviously, like, there'll be a little transition into the combat music, but then the combat music is entirely fluid in, it can go up, it can go down, it can go back up, it could jump all the way down to super low intensity and then all the way up to super high intensity, or at any point in between those mixes, just so, again, it feels warranted in what level the music is at. Because other games, especially in the fantasy-ish RPG genre, tend to just have like combat music. And sometimes there's a little interactivity to it, but other times it's just like, oh, this is the combat track when you're in like the plains biome or something, and there's not really I don't know, a level to it, because I felt that was more satisfying. It's like as you defeat the enemies, the intensity of the combat kind of winds down, and then we sting back out into the general music. So that was how it works, and that was a real pain to make, because essentially it made every song had to be written like 7 different ways, because all of the music all the time is actually part of the same song. So when you're in Emerald Stair or Galwain's Tusks or wherever, that super duper ambient version of music you're hearing is actually the same thing as the bigger orchestral versions. And it's all continuously running all the time. And through, game engine stuff, that's how it gets so seamless in transitioning between the different states, which is really, really cool, but very tedious to write.
Okay. To piggyback off it, outside of the lighthouse, was there another moment where how the music kind of cues in and it when you played through, where you just said to yourself, "Oh, that was it. That was it." Like, yes.
Yeah, there's certain points in Emerald Stair where you get up to kind of like the higher areas and whatever, and you can kind of really see the landscape. Moments like that were the ones I always called out, but it was actually a lot of the level design team going in and finding where they thought it would be complemented to. So I haven't really experienced the final music systems in the game quite yet, just because I've been kind of taking a break from it. But yeah, there were points in like the prologue where you get to the section with like the big waterfall, and you can kind of see everything, and that was a big point with that. In Dawn Treader, the sort of like not like secret dungeon, but the first major dungeon in Dawnshore, where you go down to the shrine and all that. When you see that first overlook, and I think even Kai in the dialogue calls out something like, wow, the view is so amazing.
Yeah, he does.
How did they build that? Whatever he says. Yeah, moments like that where it was like really obvious that this is an important thing. There should probably be bigger music here. And then, other kind of side moments I would find in like Shatterscarp, the desert region. You can get up onto one of the like plateaus on the opposite side of the map from Thirdborn, the city that's in Shatterscarp. And moments like that, it was like, okay, this is beautiful. That's where the music sort of kicks in. Because otherwise, like I said, it's just annoying if there's just, the whole time. Because sometimes it's like I'm literally just trying to fill up my canteen in the lake. I don't need you screaming at me that like, this is music now.
No doubt. Thanks.
I just loved, like, when you're talking about the combat side of things, like definitely noticed a dynamicity to that around, like, especially going from obviously the Dawnshore all the way to the final area of the game, and like running into the different threat levels, or just getting ambushed by the amount of bad guys, and just hearing how intense the music was. And sometimes when I'm realizing I wasn't high enough, I'm just sprinting away, and the music is just like charging behind you while you're running from it, because you know what you're in for. And I feel like that is such a good way, like such a great thing that has been done so well in this game, because like, as you say, some places it doesn't matter what the threat level is or anything like that. You're just getting that intense music coming through. But I definitely felt the dynamicy around like the threat level, especially when I'm a lot higher level and I go back and I run into someone who's a lot lower. Like, you don't feel like it's this massive threat to you in comparison. So
yeah, and I think that's an important thing that game music composers sort of overlook is, a not insignificant amount of the intention of game music is to inform the player of what's happening. So, it's like the old meme of like, why do I hear boss music?
Yeah.
Like, we all know what that means on some level, but I think sometimes game composers don't think about that. And especially like when you're first getting started writing for games or things like that, of, you're just thinking like, oh, exploring music, fighting music, and you're not thinking in terms of like, when this comes on, based on the choices I have made in this piece of music, what am I telling the player? Because there's one music system in the game, which I don't know. We don't really need to get into like the spoilers of it. You may or may not even hear this song, basically, based on the choices you make in the game. But one of the more interesting systems that we came up with is there's a part in the game where there's sort of an emergency situation that happens, and you need to run across the map to get to this place. And it's like super urgent, bad things are happening. So we start off in a pretty big music piece. There's like big drums, pretty rapid things like string ostinatos and all that stuff. And in doing that, we're saying this is urgent, right? So we assume the player is going to go on the path of least resistance. There's kind of like a clearly ish marked path that you can run to get to where you need to be. But what if you don't go there? And how do we try and tell the player that like, hey, this is where you're supposed to be going? And Dying Light 2 does a really good example of this, and I think that was sort of where we lifted the idea from. When you leave the main path, the music starts to die down into the super ambient version, which it feels less satisfying, and you kind of want that like intensity, and you want, again, that lack of ludonarrative dissonance of there is something really bad happening. The music should be very intense. So when it's not very intense and you know something urgent is happening, how do I get you back on track to get to where you're supposed to be? So when you're on the right path, the music is the way it should be. And as you remove yourself from that path, we sort of de-incentivize that by taking the music away. And that's such a weird way as a musician to have to think about things. But when you're writing for games and interactive media, it's a really important question to ask of like, at any given moment, what is the music telling the player?
I think that's a really good call out though when you think about it, like, because gamers aren't gonna do what the developer wants them to do or think that they're gonna do. You're gonna have people who will mainline, and you're gonna have people who
I saw was someone on like, I think it was the subreddit, showing how they out of bounds like glitched around the first boss fight in the game by just like jumping on the rocks and then getting to the prologue. And it was like, okay, cool. I wrote all that music there and you're just gonna skip it.
100%, totally understandable for him. Oh my god, yeah. But I think that's quite neat that sort of thought has gone into that. And was there a lot of, like, from your perspective around, like, obviously you've played video games in the past, you talked about the Skyrim problem and such, was there that sort of thought that went into, if I was playing this game, how would I want to experience the music myself? Was there any sort of thought that went into that around developing the soundtrack from your perspective there, Venus?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the weirder game composers in that I play the game that I'm writing for a lot, and a lot of composers don't tend to do that. Some do, but weirdly most of them don't. I guess it's just different processes for different people and whatever. But yeah, for me that was a huge part of it. I always had my notebook next to me as I would play through that area or that mission or whatever dungeon I was writing for, and just take a bunch of notes of like, where did I go? What did I do? Who did I talk to? Were there any kind of thoughts in my head as I was doing this? Were there any interesting lines of dialogue or whatever? What kind of moods did I experience? And then usually during that, I would take a screen recording with OBS and take screenshots and stuff along the way, just so I would have like visual references, because I'm just a very visual, like music is a heavily visual process for me. But there were slower playthroughs I would do sort of after that to kind of wander off the beaten path and just see like what else might someone do. And when I'm, not doing the mission and like the intended thing, what other types of things am I running into? What other conversations are, random NPCs having and things like that. And yeah, that made it both easier and more difficult to come up with the music for the game, because in a game like Avowed, there's a lot of sort of funny moments, there are a lot of kind of hidden moments, and there's a lot of just side quests and little things that have different narrative tones. I don't know if any of you have done the one in, I think it's in the City of Paradise, where like a little kid asks you to go get him a knife, and it's just like sort of a funny. I'm pretty sure it's in Paradise, but there's just this random side quest where it's like a kid that's like, "Hey, I want a knife. Go get me one." So the music also has to complement that, as well as like, oh, there's sort of like a weird classist tension in the city at all times. So we need to kind of complement that too.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important to play the game and just develop a little bit of a deeper understanding of all of the different, hues and shades of moods that we might experience during this section of the game.
Good call out. Nero, fire away. He's gone. He's gone. He's playing Avowed. He's left us.
He's trying to get that kid a knife right now.
It's like, where's that knife for that
He's
kid?
like, what kid? Damn it, what kid?
I missed this quest.
No, okay. So my bad, my mic. So I got one of the mics where like when you touch it, it goes off. So that happened. My bad. But
You're all good. I'm teasing.
so I love Obsidian, right? They've made some of my favorite games. Fallout New Vegas, my favorite Fallout game. Let's see what else. Outer Worlds 2. I can't wait for that to come out this year. But I love the Outer Worlds. Pentiment was very unique, very dope. I have to go back to that. And that was just such a different game. So they take these different risks. My question to you is, and Grounded as well, right? Yo, they really be cooking, man. Obsidian, they be working. So I say all that to say, how long have you been with Obsidian, and what is it like working with them?
I don't actually work there on staff or anything like that. I was just contracted for the soundtrack. I'm totally independent of them. But I worked, like I said, for about 8 months total last year, which was like way late in the development process for Avowed. But yeah, it was really cool to work with them. I mostly worked with Ryan Warden, who's the producer of the soundtrack, and then the production director at Obsidian. But I got to work with, like Carrie Patel and Berto, and a little bit with Dylan, who's kind of the front of sound design and things like that. So,
okay,
met a lot of the team and talked a lot. Matt Hansen, the art director, and everybody I could, just to kind of pick their brains on, how do you interpret the themes of the game? What are things that you like about it? I think one of the early questions I asked was, what do you think people are going to get wrong about the game? And things like that. And it was really cool because they're all very nerdy people. And I appreciate that, because like you can tell their passion for the, not only Avowed, but like any project they're doing runs really, really deep, which is cool to see, instead of just like, I don't know, Call of Duty season 4,
right, exactly.
where it's like, I don't know.
Exactly. Yo, brother, thank you.
Make another pile of money right now.
Yeah.
I love that. And you can tell it's some real nerds and real gamers that's passionate about that, because it's a nerdy RPG, man. And it's not for everyone, but it's definitely for me. I love all the dialogue options and stuff like that. So that kind of can tag team into my next question, because, you say you came later into the development cycle, and you did all of this wonderful work in 8 months, which is even more impressive when you think about it, because the game has been in the works for a while. So for you to come that late into development and get the sound as good as it is, and just fits perfectly with the tone and all of the work you've done. My next question is, do you ever, recycle or remix materials when creating new works?
Never really between projects. It's not really something I've done. In the case of Avowed, though, I would usually develop one piece of music for each region, and then I would use that as kind of a template for all of the other music within that region. And that was partially a time saving and efficiency measure, but also just a measure to make sure that every section of Avowed has its own sort of sonic palette, because the art team and the area design team did a phenomenal job making every region feel really unique. Like Dawn Shore, even from Dawn Shore to Emerald Stair, they're very close in proximity in the map, but also just in the gameplay narrative. Like you go from one directly to the other, but as soon as you enter Emerald Stair, it feels very different. And that was important to me, to make sure that, like, whether it's the exploration music or the combat music or one of the cutscenes or like little audio stingers or whatever, you should be able to listen to just that and go, oh, that's from, Shatterscarp, and that one's from
Mm-hmm.
Dawn Shore, and that one's from Emerald Stair, and whatever. So there wasn't really like direct recycling of anything. When I started on Avowed, it was starting completely from scratch, just because I think it's really important just to stay open to the process
Mm-hmm.
and not bring like assumptions or, I don't know, formulas to things beyond like, something that could actually be useful. But yeah, it was not a lot of, I don't know, boilerplate things, other than once I found that level's sound, I would try and adhere to that pretty closely where it made sense. And every once in a while there's a little deviation from that, but if there's a deviation, there has to be a reason for it.
Okay. So, and I'm excited to have you here because all right, so this throughout this entire generation, I've been pretty harsh on UE5, especially a lot of the games that tend to use Unreal Engine 5 is lackluster, or it's just it's a lot of hype, but it hasn't been delivering. And oddly enough, Xbox first party games tend to be delivering the best UE5 experiences personally for me, and also smaller indie games I want to highlight too, like Jasant. I think that was one of the games that really highlight Nanite really well. And so I got Avowed in RoboCop Rogue City. That was like a double A game that used Unreal Engine 5 really good as well. So my question to you from the sound, how big of a role do engines play? And how many engines have you worked on so far and with?
Generally for me, I'm not super involved in the engine side with like the deep implementation and whatnot. I know Unreal though has started developing kind of its own version of middleware. So on my end, I'm generally only dealing with like writing the music and then dealing with like Wise and Fmod, which are middleware pieces of
Okay.
software. And that's, for those watching who don't know what middleware is, it's the technology that gets the music into the game and makes it do the things that you want it to in the game. So like if we're exploring, it's going to play this track instead of this track, and because it's exploration music, we're going to have these different levels of intensity to it, and we'll determine with a set of variables that are called from Unreal or Unity or whatever how that music is going to change. But yeah, I don't typically deal directly in the engine, but I do know that Unreal is doing its own middleware thing. I think it's called Meta Sound or something like that,
Something like
maybe.
that, yeah.
Um,
Something similar to
that's
that, yeah.
that sounds right, but I don't think that's it. Which I think is kind of cool, and I hope it gets better, because Wise kind of sucks to use. I don't like working in Wise. It's a thing that I have to do.
Okay, yeah, because I always wondered that, because the game engines is the foundation of gaming
Yeah.
and games most of the time. And I always wondered, like, is there anything to help out the audio department in there? You got all these mocap features and everything like that, but I do think sound design, sound quality, music, and all of that is really, really important. So I always wondered if the engine at hand, whether it's the Red engine from Cyberpunk, which they're actually leaving behind for Unreal Engine 5. So thanks for that insight, man. I was always definitely wondering that. Soul and Panda, man, before I go through all my questions, please, y'all got anything y'all want to ask the man?
Of course, but we'll let Panda go. As you take a break here and maybe go get yourself a lozenge after all of that talking that you've been doing there, kid.
I was just
I'm
gonna.
going to give you a hard time. I'm going to give you a hard time. That's
Gotta
what
make
we
it count.
do.
Not every day.
Venus,
you
that's
get,
what we do here. We give each other a lot
A
of
hard
sugar, honey,
time.
iced tea, and we do it constantly. It
Look,
is
I'm gonna
all
say
with
this:
love.
if y'all thought I came here not to ask this man questions and to pick his brain,
Yeah,
y'all are
yeah,
surely
yeah.
mistaken.
Clearly, you have come to ask him questions. Just
Questions.
remember, yeah,
Yeah.
you might want to
I
ask
was.
one or two. Panda, what you got?
I was really just going to ask: was creating a soundtrack for video games like ever on your horizon? Like, how did you fall into this exactly? Was it something that you always wanted to do, or was it just kind of asking, how you kind of fell into this line of work?
Yeah, early on I was just like a guitar player and in bands and things like that. And I never really pictured like video game soundtracks being a thing. I've always been very into game and film soundtracks, but wasn't something I ever thought I'd find my way into up until I just got more and more interested in that than regular music. So the first couple games I worked on were actually apps, which was interesting on the note of like engines and stuff, using like what is it, Godot and other like mobile game engines. Those are an interesting beast sometimes. But yeah, apps were really where I got started, which I thought was odd. I always pictured apps just using like stock music. But some of them, like some mobile games now have like ridiculous budgets. So, that was kind of cool to get in there. And I've done some like, media composition work, short films and things like that. I've done a lot of licensed music where I write music that's in, libraries that get picked up and put into shows or whatever. And I've always liked the collaboration that comes in working for media rather than just working on your own accord. Of course, being more like an artist at my core, I like making music. It's something I've always really enjoyed, and it's something I'm always going to do. But I like the challenges that get presented when you bring other angles to the picture. Because collaborating on music with other people's fun, you get different perspectives on things. But I think it's really interesting when you're making music and there's other people who are going to ask questions that you never consider. And I think it's really a fun challenge that it breaks up all of your pre-assumed things about whatever of like how music works or why it could work that way or whatnot. With Avowed specifically, I have my YouTube channel and I have my own music that's out and whatever. And Ryan, the production director at Obsidian's been a fan of my music and my channel for a long time. So he actually used one of my instruments because I make different sample instruments and sound packs and things like that. He used one of my instruments for the music of Fort Northreach in the prologue, the castle where like the massacre happened. So he actually used one of my instruments for that to write some temp music. And then he was apparently out getting a haircut at some point, and one of my songs came up in his Spotify playlist, and he just really liked the vibe of that particular song. And he was like, I think there's something there. We should go get that guy. So that was how this game came about. But most of the time it's just, I don't know, serendipity more than anything. I don't really actively go out looking for work. I just wait for interesting projects to show up and, come across my inbox and see if it's a vibe. And for me, Avowed, once I met with Ryan and learned more about the game and, saw some early footage and whatever, I was like, yeah, I can get in with that. Like I get it. I'm not a fantasy game music composer at all, but I get it. And that was really, really cool, which is funny because Avowed is my first fantasy soundtrack ever. Absolutely. I've never made music like that before. And also my first orchestral soundtrack ever. Literally day one of the project which is funny because it was once I was like under contract and it was my job to do it now. My Google searches were like, how to write orchestral music. What is orchestrating? And things like that, it was really, really funny. But, I was like, well, I'll be damned if I'm not going to figure this out.
I think,
No, go ahead.
yeah, go.
No. Go ahead. Yeah, you were about to comment on what
I was just going to say, like, what was that process like? So you've got to see a little bit of the game, obviously got to most likely understand a little bit of the story and what they were doing, and probably looked at maybe a bit more of the art to kind of see what it was like in each biome. What was that like coming up with the music for that? Because I know you said you worked closely with like music director and all of and the producer in that. Was there a lot of I guess conversations around like, hey, here's a little bit of what I'm thinking. Is that kind of what you were thinking, and that sort of process that went down around the beginning parts of creating this fantasy soundtrack for Avowed?
Yeah, I mean, they told me right away they wanted something that was different, and I think that was why I got picked as versus any other fantasy game composer. Because I told them right up front, like, if you want sweepy string stuff and whatever, I don't want to do that because I don't care and I don't enjoy making that. So at first I started off with just a pitch demo where I got an early build of the game. I played the prologue, made some music that was just a pitch demo, not like an actual interactive music system yet, just a piece of music, put it over some gameplay footage, and then I recorded a short video that I sent to them that was just like, here is my idea for what this game should sound like, and here's why I think it should sound like this. Because it was, right off the bat, super different and not what was, I guess the assumed version of what the music would be. So that was really cool, and they were very, very open to pretty much any idea I had within reason, as long as it wasn't like, slamming dubstep or like hard tech. That would have been
yeah,
a little
imagine
weird.
dubstep.
Yeah, that was really cool because it was for the prologue of the game, and I liked the mood shift between this very colorful, fantastical, mystical island that you're on into something like Fort Northreach that was really dark, like in a narrative moment. It's a pretty heavy, like, oh, there's a bunch of dead bodies here, and I love the contrast between that. So, I kind of attracted myself to that, and I told them that what I like about this game is that it's not a hero's journey, but it's set up instead as a hero's mystery. And that's the idea I want to explore in the music. Because I think we've all watched like The Lion King or something. Like, I think we get it in terms of like, the 6-point hero arc, the sad part, the good part, the whatever, and that was where I thought there would be something new to explore and why I wanted to take the project on.
Because I feel like Obsidian games, with the choices that they have, you're kind of just living in it where like there's a lot of gray area, and you want to be able to feel that contrast align with what you're doing in the game versus what you're hearing in the game. So yeah, love it. Soul, shoot.
Okay, let's have a little fun. You ready to have a little fun? All right, let's go, baby. Okay, I'm gonna shoot out some names, and I want you to give the first title that comes to mind when you hear it.
Okay.
Okay. Hans Zimmer.
Dune, I guess, just because that's like the most recent thing.
Danny Elfman.
Oh, Nightmare Before Christmas, all the way.
Yes.
John the God Williams.
Probably Harry Potter, because my wife makes me watch it like every year, the whole series front to back.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that one. Okay, here we go. Alan Silvestri. I threw that one in. That was a twist one. That was a twist.
I'm not like
Okay.
super familiar with a lot of his stuff. What would be a really good one? Yeah, I don't know, actually.
All right, I'm gonna make these last two easy for you. Randy Newman.
Oh God, Toy Story. Gotta do it.
Okay. And I'm gonna well, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. That sounds wrong. I'm gonna mess up the name. Wow.
Fuck you, clip it, fuck you.
Ludwig van Gorensen.
I have no idea who that is.
I think I messed up his name. He did Black Panther.
Oh. Yeah, what is his name?
It's Ludwig something. Gorensen or something like that. Yeah.
Okay,
So
well, Black Panther, I guess.
Yeah,
by
because
default.
Black Panther was one of those soundtracks when you watch the movie, and I know we're talking about games here, but we're talking about music, and so how the music from these composers just really brought you into these different worlds, and so I kind of picked those specifically because the music was such a big part of the different movies that they scored or whatnot. I think John Williams, I immediately go to 2. So I'm going to Jaws first. Jaws had me scared to get in the water as a child through adulthood. I kid you not. And so that was a big one for me. And then also with John Williams, there was E.T. E.T. was awesome. You know what I mean? And well, then there's Indiana Jones. What hasn't he done that is culturally relevant? You know what I mean? everyone knows, when I don't even think we call it the right thing. We just call it like Vader's theme. But
Right.
it's
Yeah.
the Imperial March, right? So, he's been so influential in, just the landscape. And then, Ludwig kind of came on the scene, and just Black Panther, just that really just took me, it made me just feel like Wakanda was like a real place. And I would hear
Right.
something like this if I went there. And so, I say that to say, playing this game after hearing the music and now playing the game, I am really tied to these different places. And you hit it right on the head. When I'm still in Emerald Stair.
Okay.
When I came into Emerald Stair, I was like, I am in a whole new world. That's a Disney reference, but I'm in a whole new world, right? I'm big on Disney. I love Disney, but I am in a new world, and it felt fresh and new, and everything about Emerald Stair is fresh and new compared to the first zone. And
Mm.
so I really like that. So I just wanted to kind of get an idea of, and I did have an actual Avowed question for you, but I just want to change up the pace. But these are the things that bring me into the game, and what I absolutely love, and just, get me lost as I'm, searching around, and how different things swell, and you're up and down. And, when you get into these new areas within, let's say like Emerald Stair right now, it's just really, really dope. But let me jump to this question. And of course, Avowed is in the Pillars of Eternity universe, which I never played that game, but I see it in Game Pass, and I'm like, yeah, it looks pretty cool. I've been thinking about it beforehand, and now that I'm playing this, I might actually go back to it and check it out, right? So, with that being said, how did you balance creating a unique musical identity for Avowed while still maintaining thematic connections to the existing Pillars of Eternity soundtrack? Or
Yeah, it
did
was really, really hard, and that's why writing for franchises is horrifying, because it's like
you?
if you get it wrong, people are just gonna hate you. And some people hated my score for Avowed, and that's completely fine. Um, yeah, it was a really hard choice, but the studio pretty upfront said, like, this isn't Pillars of Eternity 3, so don't do that. And
Okay.
if it had been Pillars of Eternity 3, I don't think I would have taken the gig, because
Mm,
I'm just really not interested in doing the thing that somebody else did, but do it again, just a little bit different. Like, that's not interesting to me at all. And with Avowed, it was a very delicate line to walk in how far am I allowed to push things away in an interesting way that still respects the sort of sound of the Pillars universe, because this is a Pillars game. It's just
mhm.
not Pillars of Eternity 3. Like, it's set in the same universe, just not really directly related. So with that, I think the thing I attached to was just the shift in perspective, because in Pillars, I don't know if you've seen gameplay and stuff, but it's an
Yeah.
isometric sort of like dungeon crawler sort of thingy.
Right.
And it's a much more like RPG, like it's very much like a CRPG
Right.
experience. So I hadn't played the games either. I knew of them, but I'm not really into like the isometric things besides like the OG Fallouts. And I played a little bit of the games. I didn't get through them all the way just because they're very long if you really want to experience them. But listen to the soundtrack. Um, I listened to both soundtracks probably about 3 times, I think. And then
Okay.
I just cut myself off because I don't want to listen to that. Whenever I'm working on something, I almost always try to listen to exclusively things that are really far removed from what I'm working on, because otherwise influence is just kind of a vicious cycle of, if I was writing for like the Harry Potter game and I listened to a bunch of John Williams music, I'm just going to write something that sounds kind of like John Williamsy stuff, and I don't think that's interesting. So with this game, I was listening to a lot of like African drum music, a lot of street performers when I was working on like the City of Paradise, I found a website, I can't remember what it was, but it just is like weird music from around the world that you'll never hear because it's like some local radio station in like Brazil or something that is playing some local band, and it plays really crazy stuff, and a lot of bluegrass, and a lot of heavy metal and like extreme metal stuff, and just trying to pull as many different places as I can, because I think that feeds into something a little more interesting, where you pick up a rhythm here or kind of a harmonic idea here, and how would I apply that to this game? And I always think that's a way more interesting question than going like, okay, so Justin Bell did this and this and this. How can I do that but be a legally safe version of that without just ripping him off? Because, following a composer like Justin Bell, horrifying prospect. And that's why, if it would have been like, hey, can you write Pillars of Eternity 3? I don't think I would have done it. And I think even Mick Gordon talked about that with the Doom soundtrack, where like, if you get the Doom soundtrack wrong, people will kill you.
Yeah.
Yep. I thought that was kind of the line to walk, was like, okay, this is the sound of Pillars. So I know that like these are the types of instruments. These are kind of some of the melodic phrasings we use. These are some of the harmonies we use. How can I borrow that a little bit, but do something else with it that, doesn't just feel like a ripoff of that? Because I feel like if I just wrote the exact same things that Justin Bell had did, I think people would have just not liked it at all. And I'm fine with an idea being divisive, because I think if it's not, you probably didn't really do anything interesting. Because the phrase I always used in production, or the idea I always used in production when we were working on the soundtrack, was like, everybody loves vanilla ice cream. It's fine. Like, it works. It's just a thing that's there. But some people, not everybody, some people really like pistachio ice cream. And those are the people I'm interested in here, where like the people that get it are really going to get it and really going to like it and really going to appreciate it. And then some people are just going to absolutely hate it and think it's the worst thing in the world. And that's fine, because I think you probably at least did something interesting there.
No doubt. Hey, thank you. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm a pistachio person right now, because I'm really digging.
Well, good.
And I feel like that you've captured what the living lands. Because, like I said, this is my first journey, so I have no idea. So if this is, I'm kind of like, I'm looking forward to if there's more Avowed or games set, continuing in this universe, and hopefully they bring you back if there's more.
And I think that was another advantage here, is like in the Pillars games, we don't really do anything with the living lands. It's just, I called it the Australia of Aora. That was my reference point. Like in like colonial England and whatever, like old English territories and whatever, we had Australia as like this weird prison island where we send all the creeps and weirdos. And I thought that like, okay, that's the living lands here. Is it's very removed from the rest of the universe, and we don't have a ton of like canon information as to what it's like or what it's about or what it even sounds like. So because in Avowed, we're seeing the whole shift in perspective, we're experiencing an entirely new version of the world of Aora and the entire Pillars universe, and we're also going to a place that we have never really been before, I get a pretty free license to say like, this is what that sounds like, I guess. Because, otherwise, if we were doing Pillars 3 and going to the same places and whatever, there are some very established things that say this is what the music is in this place.
All right, I got another question for you, man. What was the very first video game you composed, and what was that experience was like? And was you nervous?
The first game I composed for some app from some indie developer somewhere, it was a puzzle game, and it was really uninspiring because they kind of just said like, hey, it was like, what's that, Jungle Jump or whatever the hell it's called? It's like Jungle Dash, that thing where you're in a jungle and you platform and jump between. It was basically that, but different.
Okay.
So they were like, this is the game and we want music kind of like this. So it was, like bongos, marimba, kalimba, little like string flourishes now and again. And the only reason I took it was just because I'd never written music for a game before, and I was interested because Temple Run. Sorry, yeah,
Temple Run. Yeah.
It was like a Temple Run ripoff from some developer somewhere that they just watched my channel. They reached out, hey, I'm making a game. I work at whatever company it was. Can you make music for this? And it was like, probably.
Okay, so
And it was cool because I learned so much from like this one game that I didn't like and didn't even care about. And normally I don't take projects
that's
like that
dope.
because I'm not, if I'm not into it, I don't care and I don't want to waste time on it. But it was a new challenge that I had never really confronted yet of like, oh yeah, like how do you make game music? I know it's different and stuff. I could figure that out maybe. So that was really cool. And it was in I think it was the Godot engine. And that was a great just sort of trial by fire of like, how do I put this together? Because I had never, like I said earlier, I had never had to ask myself those questions of like, what is the player doing? How long are they doing it for? When they do this thing and this thing, does the music change? And if it does, how and why? But what if you pause and then, oh wait, but you die. So like, I don't know when you're going to die.
Yeah.
So how do I make the music stop at any point? And that was a really, really cool experience, and I'm super glad I did it. And then most of the games after that were little apps and things like that, just because it was a fun.
Shout out to that game, man.
Yeah, whoever you are and whatever your game was, like
shout out to them, man. That's
6 years ago now. That was really cool. Thanks for that, I guess.
So, is it safe to say Avowed is the biggest game you've composed music for to date?
So far, yeah.
Okay.
And it's one of those things of like, even if that is the peak of my career, I'm totally good with that because that was an awesome experience, and I think the game
you
is
peaked
great.
on a hell of a game if that's the case.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
And it's funny because that was my first game that had a released soundtrack, like an official game soundtrack. The other one I'm working on right now is Ground Branch, which is I think trying to release this year or something like that, or get to the 1.0 or whatever. But Avowed is like technically the first game soundtrack I've ever released, which is kind of like a hell of an achievement to be like, no big deal.
Yeah.
But the first game soundtrack I did is a AAA game with like a gajillion-dollar budget. So that's kind of neat, I guess.
Yeah, that's
pretty dope,
awesome, man. That's awesome. So I make music too, right? I like rap music. I love all type of music, rock music, alternative rock, hip hop. One of my questions as well is, as somebody like in music, and I'm passionate and dedicated about it, just like gaming, it's really easy to get frustrated, give up, take breaks, walk away, start over, not really have confidence in your work sometimes. How do you approach that? How do you trust yourself? And what are your overall methods to not go mad? Because you can go mad sometimes in trying to create any type of art, I would argue.
Right. Yeah. I have this really weird habit when I don't feel like making music, I just don't do it.
Okay.
And I think that's like the first mistake a lot of people make is like, you show up, even if you're not doing music, like you're a painter or whatever, you show up and like try and make something every single day. And I think there's merit to that. Like in music, you might come up and like doodle on your guitar or your piano or whatever, and you just like make a little thing and then you put it away. But if you open up your music software and try and make a song every single day, you're probably going to lose your mind. But I found nothing quite motivates you like a deadline. And especially in something like Avowed, it's like, okay, I have one chance to write the soundtrack for this game. I have 8 months to do it, and it needs to be really good. So that immediately removes a lot of the barrier to entry, because when you're working on something with no end date in sight, the questions can just extrapolate and become infinite of like, is this kick drum good enough? Do the vocals sit right? Is it loud enough? How could I make the drop hit harder? Is the hook good enough? Should I edit this to be a different tempo so it works better for people on TikTok? And, all those things that we bring to the process. But when you're working on a deadline, it's really a huge motivator in that you remove all of those questions because they're just not necessary. Because the ultimate question in like game music is, does this serve the game? And I think a lot of people would be very surprised to find how low that bar is sometimes. Like in things like a cutscene, you may just need like a little string bed for a second and then like a little French horn line or something. So that's 2 tracks. You could probably make that in under 15 minutes, and that's good enough to ship in a huge game, you know. And I think I don't know, we always have this grand picture of like what it means to be an artist and to have accomplished the thing that's good enough to be, you know, seen by the masses. But if anything, I think Avowed is living proof that anyone can do this kind of stuff if you just apply yourself, because I wrote, mixed, and mastered and delivered the entire soundtrack for a AAA video game from this room, which is just like a
Yeah,
spare bedroom in my house. You know, it's really not as difficult as we want to make it out to be. But, you know, there's always those kind of imposter syndrome moments and bits of self-doubt and whatever. And I think that's just the nature of the process. We always have to question if something is right, because art as a part of the human condition is just like an expression of ego.
hmm
But I think we get way too attached to how our ego fits into the result rather than the process. And, you know, I think that the best you can do is just ask yourself, am I happy to have my name on this when it goes out the door? It
definitely.
doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough. So, yeah, I think that's a really important mindset to keep, is just, you don't have to kill yourself every step of the way. Sometimes, like, the simple solution is fine as long as it works in the context of whatever you're doing.
Okay. Some beautiful insight. Love that.
Yeah.
And that is definitely proof, man, because like I said, mixing, mastering, doing everything you did in a short time frame for this huge game, man, that's amazing. That's nothing short of just pure talent. So congrats to you again, man. That's
Nice.
love to see it.
Yeah. Thank you. Soul.
Oh, hey, you know, I have plenty of questions. So,
know.
you know, I like to keep my questions fresh and off the beaten path or whatnot, because you just kind of answered one of the questions that I was going to ask, and you can, you know, feel free to jump in and answer it more. But I do have something else that's a little bit more lighter. You know, I like to keep it light around here. So to get to the kind of question here, you just kind of given some advice, because I was going to say, well, what advice would you give to aspiring composers that are interested in working in the gaming industry? And you just kind of gave a little bit. I would have taken what you just said. You know, it's like, hey, you know, just approach it this way. So if you would answer that question, and then when you come back, you know, when you finish, I do have another question that is a little bit more. It's a little lighter.
Yeah, I think just general advice for game composers and aspiring musicians or artists of any kind, really. I think my favorite piece of advice, it comes from Austin Kleon, who has written a bunch of really good books, Steal Like an Artist, Share Your Work, you know, things like that. It's really good stuff. He has this idea of make little gifts for people. And I think that's great, because that's what Avowed was to me, was like, I'm not making this soundtrack to be like, I am the next Jeremy Soule, and I made Skyrim level soundtrack, which, like, that would be ridiculous. And like, you would
Right.
just sound like a giant ass if you were like, no big deal, but I am the greatest composer of all time. But you know, the person I made the soundtrack for primarily was me, because I get to have the really cool experience to say, you know, what does this video game sound like? And I get to define that, because no matter what, if people love it or hate it, that is the Avowed soundtrack. Deal with it. But I think Austin Kleon's advice to like make little gifts for people, I think, is such a beautiful sentiment with creative work, because I made this soundtrack for the like 11-year-old version of me that was playing Oblivion and Morrowind at 4 a.m. and experiencing that world and that music and going, damn, that's so cool. Like, that feels really neat. I love the part that goes da 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 da. And, you know, I want to make music someday like that. That's really, really cool. And if one person out there who, you know, is probably, like I said, some 12-year-old kid who got this on Game Pass and is playing it after school, I really hope that someday that kid listens to this soundtrack in this game, enjoys it so much that they go out and start making music themselves, and maybe one day work on an Obsidian game too. Because I remember playing Fallout New Vegas and going, damn, this game is awesome. And then next thing I know, a couple years later, I get an email from Obsidian saying, hey, we like your stuff. And I think that's the merit of making gifts for people, because if you stay true to your thing, whatever it is artistically, that's what's bound to determine the value of your work to other people. Because if I was just making a bunch of fantasy music stuff, and I had this portfolio that's all fantasy music, what separates me from literally anyone else? Like, the reason I got this gig is because I'm weird, and they like that. And I think that's the idea, is I don't make the composite average of whatever. I want to make something interesting. And the things I find interesting musically are very different from anyone else, because that's how, being a human works. And if you just make things that are interesting, that's bound to make you successful on a long enough timeline. Like, I truly believe in the idea that success is inevitable if you have the tenacity to match.
That's powerful right there. I like that. I like that, and that's a good word. Somebody should clip that right there, so more people can hear that and then use that on a kind of like a daily mantra or whatnot. So I'm in education, and I don't know if you caught that earlier when I was talking about being in the classroom. And so right now, my students are working on GT projects, and for those who are not not sure what that means, it's just gifted and talented, right? And so there's a few of my students, excuse me, my voice is kind of going out, I'm sorry. There's a few of my students who are actually working on it's the pursuit of passion. What is your passion, right? And so you were just really speaking to that. So I have shared with them that I am on a podcast, but I haven't shared with them what it is, because it's not always kid friendly. So I don't really want them to see, and then they'll go search it and they'll find it or whatever. But that
Okay, I don't tell people what
is-
I do either. When I meet new people and they ask, I'm just like, I work in tech, and just say, like, because I found that that's a vague enough answer, but it's a
Yeah.
boring enough answer to not warrant any further discussion.
Right. And so, but I would love to, I got to figure out a way to clip that so that they can hear that piece right there, because this is really something that right before we had started these projects, that it would have been really good for them to hear going into the project, but also just something that they can carry on with them moving forward. But the fact that some of them have chosen that gaming, and some of them are budding podcasters, is really, really cool. And so I'm over here like, oh really, it's gaming, podcasting, hey, I can kind of help you with that, I can guide you along the way. So I think that's really, really cool. And that is some, like I said, really, really good advice that you've given there. Now for my second question, sir. So in your creative process, how much is your better half involved? Especially when you're getting these deadlines, and this is like have been the biggest, I'm going to say the biggest. Is it fair to say this is the biggest thing that you maybe have worked on? You did
Oh yeah,
mention.
easily.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is like your better half like, hey, hun, I know you're down there working, and there's a deadline, and bills got to be paid, baby. I
Yeah.
need you on it. Is she kind of like that, or is she like, hey, hon?
Yeah, she locks
how's
me up here, and I just have to
everything
slide a check under the door once a month. I'm
Say,
not allowed to
well,
leave or eat until I get the
Open the tray, bread, water.
yeah.
Done.
Yeah, she slides room temperature bologna under the door to keep me fed.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. As long
Yeah,
as she
she's
fries
super
the bologna
supportive.
first, she got to fry it. But okay, so she's super supportive, and I'm gonna let you finish that. So she's fried bologna. So she's super supportive, but is she the person that outside of you that you play music for first, or do you not include her in that process to say, hey babe, check this out, I'm thinking this is what, man, I can see this for the game, what do you think? You ever have any of those moments? How involved
yeah.
was she in this process for Avowed?
Yeah, she's very, very involved. She's my usual like counsel when I have the inevitable mental breakdown, because I've been writing the same levels music for 4 straight days, and I'm like, but is the violin good? And it's great because she just doesn't care that much about the things I do, because she's not, like when you're a musician, the way that you listen to songs on the radio is completely different from the way that someone who is not a musician listens to them. I've never had a conversation with my wife where, we're listening to a song on the radio and she's like, well, I know they used, the SM7 for the screaming vocals there, but maybe if they would have used like a Neumann large diaphragm condenser, there would have been more clarity in the 4K range. Like, no normal person thinks like that. So she's a great test of someone who is so far detached from the thing I'm looking at and the thing I'm analyzing, to where I'll bring her up and, play her the cue. Or there were times throughout the score where Obsidian would put the music into that part of the game, and I would bring her up here and like play it and show her and whatever, and ask her like, what do you think? And she'd be like, yeah, it sounds like game music. So anyways, what's for dinner? And that's a great test because she's so brutal with it, where she was like, yeah, it's fine. And then she leaves. And it's like, okay, so if she isn't pointing something out, that thing that I'm like, that's wrong, it's fine. Like
Gotcha.
no one in the real world cares because, like for some of you here, like if you haven't played Pillars of Eternity, you probably don't really care that the soundtrack doesn't sound like Pillars of Eternity 3. You don't know any better. And that's fine because all you're noticing is like, yeah, that music's cool there. Or I like the part when I got to the lighthouse and it did the thing. That was really, really cool. And that's the way that normal people experience music. And it's really hard to keep that in mind. But yeah, she's great with that stuff because she's super honest with it. And she just does not care. Like it does not matter to her if the chord voicing is the right inversion. She's just like, yeah, that's really pretty. And I always listen for little things like that when she's talking to, because she describes things in such a different way that I think it's a much more realistic impression of what that song or that mood is implying there. And that's really, really valuable because then I'm getting, essentially real-time, real-world feedback from somebody of like, does this break the immersion of the thing? Wow. And it's in a way that like it's important to try and remain objective when you're creating something, but it is next to impossible to actually do in practice.
And man, that is really cool. And by the way, when I told my students and a few other close personal friends, I said, hey, so that podcast, we're going to have the composer from this brand new video game that just dropped. It's called Avowed. And we're going to actually be interviewing, this person on Saturday. And just seeing the looks like on my students' faces is really cool because for them, it's like to see me outside of what I do every day is like, they're like, wow, you do something that has nothing to do with us and nothing to do with your daughter. Because I talk about my daughter all the time, right? So they're looking at me like, wow, that's pretty cool. But then the fact that instantly you were some famous person.
Yeah.
And just remember, like when we were kids, if someone who was somewhat famous, pseudo famous, or or super famous, and you actually met them, you were just so enamored as a kid. And for them to not even know who you are, but to know that this was going to happen is like a really, really cool moment. And I want to thank you for this opportunity because this has been cool so far, and I've really been enjoying your answers and the energy and everything else, and then just taking my off the beaten path questions because it's easy. I can sit over here and read from the questions, but I kind of like want to know like who you are and what you do and how involved is your wife, and do you just kind of sit around here and you tap on stuff and you go through like that doesn't sound good, okay, let me just sit for about 20 minutes and I'll figure it out, and what's the process and all that, just trying to answer some questions that are just more about you and who you are and what you do and what you like and what inspires you, as opposed to, well, in the third act of Avowed, what inspired you to go ahead and, that's fun and everything, but I like to get to the person. So thank you for just allowing me to ask you some off the beaten path questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that's neat that like your students know about the game and like think it's cool that you're going to talk to the composer. Like that's super neat. Of like, wow, strangers know who I am. That's weird.
Yeah. Well, because I try to incorporate things that I do into the everyday classroom because I remember my teachers just being older, and then I look. They call me Santa Claus, right? I mean, little kids will walk past me. They're like, "Hey, Santa," and I'm like, "Gosh, dog." So I just roll with it, right? So I think it's really cool because I remember my teachers just being like teachers, and they were just old, and they weren't fun, and they didn't tell stories, and we didn't know anything about their lives and the cool things that they did, or things to make them cool, or at least appear to be cool or whatnot. And not to say that I'm cool to the kids, but I'm pretty young in spirit, young at heart, and it helps that I do have a child that's their age right now. So I can really relate to what they're going through and things of that nature. And I just don't teach. I kind of dad. You know what I mean? And so you just try to stay relatable to them, and it helps me when I come home or whatnot. So any little thing that is going to help them to push them down a pathway, a career pathway that they didn't know that they were interested in, and this is the type of thing, if they get a chance to see this or see portions of this, maybe we might have a budding composer in the classroom. And I just think I look at everything as a learning opportunity. I'm so sorry, Panda and Nero and chat.
You're fine. Like,
I think
you're
everything is a
fine.
learning opportunity for our babies. And I feel like it's my job to make sure that they can see things that they normally wouldn't be exposed to,
Right.
because you just never know where that's going to take them. Like you say, and gosh, when you said it, I was like, oh my gosh, he is so young. When you were talking about hearing the music in Oblivion or whatever, and you were like, I was 10, and I'm over here like, oh my gosh, I was okay. We won't count that. But, but I'm thinking how that was inspirational to you. This type of thing is inspirational to, the youth. And hey, I'm just gonna say, man, you might want to do a couple of speaking engagement with kids. You got it. You got. I can see it on you, man.
Yeah,
I
every
think
once in a
it'll
while
be
I'll speak at like colleges and stuff about just, creative work or, like music more specifically, but generally just about, finding a career path as a creator and like redefining success is a big one, I think, too, because a lot of people think like, there's an arbitrary definition of that, and it's not the case whatsoever. Like some of the happiest people I know in the music industry play in like a cover band at local bars, and they
Okay.
enjoy it more than anyone else I know. Because I know people who are like very successful, very famous musicians who are some of the most miserable people I've ever met.
Hey, if could you Lyric Hayabusa has a question for you here. Did Venus Theory say whether any other composers inspire him directly? And I
Not
don't remember if you
specifically so
did, but
far.
if you could.
Yeah, I'm very into like the more experimental side of music, which was so funny to get like the Avowed gig, because I think like Silvestri came up earlier. Silvestri's a super famous composer, and like I don't really listen to a bunch of Silvestri stuff. And like John Williams, I think John Williams is musically great, obviously, like one of the masters of theming for sure. Just not that interested in what John Williams is doing. I don't really care most of the
Yeah.
time, where it's like I'll listen to the new John Williams thing when a new thing happens and go like, yeah, that's cool. But like I'm, kind of like I said with the Avowed soundtrack, I don't want to make sweepy string Hollywood
Gotcha.
stuff. I don't care. I don't find that interesting. I find the scores interesting where it's super out there or from something that's really challenging. But I think the most direct inspiration for me a lot of the times is like Ben Frost, Ben Salisbury, and Jeff Barrow, and Kaya Project. His name's Seb Taylor is his real name, but he's done some scoring stuff that's really interesting. Hildur Gudnadottir, however the hell you say her
Okay.
name. She did Chernobyl. She did Battlefield 2042 along with the other guy, whatever his name was. But I love stuff like that is very different and very weird. And Paul Haslinger too, I think, is a huge inspiration, because his stuff is always a little left leaning from where I would normally think you would take like standard scoring things, where I think he's a good compromise for me between the more like I hate to use the word like generic, but just the more like stuff that uses a lot of the tropes of a given genre. I think Paul Haslinger always does an interesting challenge to that and does something a little bit different that's really fun. But yeah, I'm very into the more experimental side of music, because I think there's just something there I identify more with. And even like, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, I think is an obvious one, but I also find that they seem to do sort of the same thing every time in every movie. So I've gotten a little bored of their work lately.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Lyric, I hope that tickles your fancy,
You said
with
awesome in the
those.
chat, so I assume it
Oh, good
has.
deal. Good deal. All right. Thank you. And thank you
And
for
Jason Graves
answering
too. I
that.
guess I'll shout him out. But it's funny because him and I are now like good friends. He was the guy that did Dead Space and Far Cry Primal and stuff like that. I'm actually working with him on a project for the past couple of
Oh,
weeks. Like I was just texting him earlier today.
oh, that's
But
cool.
he's probably a big influence too, just because like I love his stuff, but it also feels weird to be like, yeah, my friend is my influence.
Yeah. Hey, well, I mean, inspiration comes from a lot of different places, or influence does, and a lot of it definitely comes from the people we are around or we talk to quite a bit. So, you know, that is really really cool. Panda, I've taken up a lot of time. I
You
know I
are
had some
fine,
jokes.
Soul. That is why we have
I
you
had
here,
jokes with
by the
Nero,
way.
but hey, we haven't given you a
I was
lot
about
of
to say that was way worse than my
space.
rant earlier.
Yeah, well,
That is
hey,
fine.
hey,
Like that is why you both are here. You're
hey.
perfectly fine. You know how long I talk when we have a normal, like a standard show on, and
Oh
how I
yeah.
go down my rants. So it's fine. I was just gonna ask, do you either have a favorite track or piece of music from Avowed, whether that was on the main soundtrack or something that was just kind of in game that didn't make it to the main soundtrack that you were like most proud of, or kind of just sits with you that and if so, like why is it something that you're kind of really proud of or just inspired by with the final product that came out? Yeah.
Let's see. I think all the ones I really liked did make it onto the soundtrack. I'm pretty sure anyway. Emerald Stair definitely has, I think, my favorite music in the game, just sort of in hindsight now of like listening back to it. Those were tracks I was really, really pleased with. I think I have to look up the Avowed soundtrack now to make sure. I'm pretty sure that A Parable of Frost made it on there. Did it? Yes, that was a really fun one because that was really, really different. And I think that one was the most self-indulgent of getting to just do something super weird. And that one definitely leans more into my influences of like Ben Frost and Tim Hecker and guys like that do very experimental things. Yeah, Parable of Frost was really fun, but I think the two standout musical moments for me would be a Finding Roots.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the track, that title. That's in Emerald Stair. Mild-ish spoilers ahead, I guess. In Emerald Stair, when you get down to the bottom of Naku Tedek and you have the conversation with the Adra and you kind of learn the truth about what's going on and who you are and how it all comes together. I really love that track. I think it's really, really cool. But I think my favorite thing about it is the character themes. If you listen very carefully, the character themes for the Envoy and for the other person who I just won't name for the sake of spoilers, their themes are actually swapped with the instruments that play them. And I thought that was really fun because that's what's happening in the narrative. And I thought that was kind of a clever little like music dork moment of like, haha, that was very neat. And then the track Return
Mm.
is actually from one of the cutscenes in the very late game, so I won't get into what happens there, but that is where actually the player character's theme is played as it was written for the first time, because that is like the penultimate moment in the game before like the final big moments start happening. And yeah, when I first wrote that cutscene and wrote the harmony parts and all that, and it all came together, I was like, holy shit, I can't believe I wrote that. That is cool. Like that hits. And that's exactly, and it's very, very rare that that happens, but that is exactly what I wanted this to sound like. Where like that was the idea in my head and it actually came together the exact same way. And I was like, cool. But yeah, just I don't know how big and epic and powerful that part feels when the player envoy theme comes in. I love that one. But yeah, I think Emerald Stair probably wins it for me with just the music I will probably actually put on my playlists in the future.
Honestly, it's just fantastic, like listening and talking about this sort of stuff, because like in my day-to-day, like I'll be talking with people who aren't gamers, and they're talking about like maybe a soundtrack from a TV show or a movie or anything like that, and then you start talking to them about video games, and they haven't really thought about video games as much as people who are passionate about video games, and how
Right.
music itself is its own character in a video game, and it really brings everything together. And so I just find it fascinating to talk about this, because I've talked about some music with so many different people and it's always been about video games, because that has been such a big part of my life. And like, as much as I love reading, like it would be nice to have like the soundtrack in my mind of what I'm hearing and seeing and reading. But I get that in video games. So it's just hearing you talk so passionately about it. And like I don't get that in my day to day. So I love coming here to the show and talking about things that everyone's so passionate about, whether it's the music, whether it's the story, whether it's the engine or the look of the game, or the
Definitely.
choices that you make. But yeah, I think music is such a big piece and such a big character in a video game, and without it, I don't think we would be doing what we're doing here every week. But yeah, thank you, Venus. Nero, I know we're getting close to like 2 hours, so I didn't want to hold you hostage for too long. But like, is there
We could probably
any?
rapid fire stuff if we want.
Yeah, is there any quick questions you want to ask Nero or Soul?
Let's work on the list. Let's do it.
No, I guess like my last question would be, because I heard you mention a game earlier that you was currently working on. Is there any other games you're currently working on that you would like to share? And if so, can you just describe what those games would be so we can, put it on our radar?
Not that I'm allowed to talk about.
Okay, I figured.
Ground Branch is the only one I'm like actively working on that's announced and is like a thing. That's kind of the funny thing with games is like the time scales are so weird sometimes where it's like, well, I'm doing this, but it's not out for like 4 years,
Okay.
Yeah, Ground Branch is the only one I'm working on right now that's like actively announced and stuff. I'm pretty excited for that. I think that'll be a good change in pace from Avowed, because Ground Branch is like first person action shooter game, and I love the game. I think it's super fun, but obviously very different from like fantasy music stuff. So that'll be kind of a nice palate cleanser, I think.
All right, man. But I got no questions, but I do want to say thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming on and being able to pick your brain and ask a few very important questions, man. I love what you did with the game, man. Huge congrats. And anything you work for on going forward, I will be there to support, man. So.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No
Soul.
doubt. Yeah, I
Can
do
you
have
do
a
rapid
question.
fire, Soul? I'm kidding.
No. I can't. So here we go, real quick. So you said that you can't talk about anything that you might be doing. Now, I do want to know. You did say that the Avowed was the biggest budget, big AAA or whatnot, and I'm just wondering if you can wink one time or raise your hand or whatnot, whatever you need to do. So is this a new AAA game? Is this maybe under the Microsoft umbrella? Is it something maybe under the Sony umbrella? Or you just can you just smile like this?
Nothing from the majors yet.
Cut,
but we'll see what happens. We never know what happens, because I know the folks at Obsidian were very, very happy with the soundtrack for Avowed, so who knows what that means. And I know, I think it was maybe Carrie or someone mentioned they were like thinking about DLC stuff for Avowed. So we'll see where that goes.
Yes.
Whether or not I would write for it is a different question, though. That's something I've been asking myself a lot, was like, if there was an Avowed like DLC or even sequel, like, would I do it again? Because I think for me it would be, well, I already did that. So it would have to be like, okay, I need another completely free license to do something completely different, or I'm just going to get creatively bored. Because I feel like that would be the danger, is now that not only did I write the music for Avowed, but if I have to write for like a DLC or a sequel or something, what is the risk there in just, well, I already did that, so I've established the universe's sound. I'm just going to do that again. And I don't know that would be very interesting unless I had a really good idea for it.
Okay. And I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, but now, see, you said something that made me just think about it. I'm so sorry. And I know it said, would you take the call for Elder Scrolls 6? And I know you said you're not really a big fantasy RPG guy or just writing that kind of music. So
yeah, Elder Scrolls 6 would be hard because, like sort of like Avowed, following up Justin Bell is like, hey, here's one of the people who makes some of the best music in video games. Now it's your turn. Like, that's horrifying. Like, that's like, hey, Freddie Mercury just did like a karaoke song. You're up. So I think Elder Scrolls 6, I don't know that I would do it, and I think part of it is just like, no matter what happens, even if the next person, whoever it is that does Elder Scrolls 6, no matter what they do, it is going to attract so much hate and controversy and insanity. I have no interest in being in that ballpark, because the only thing that people are going to expect is Skyrim, but different. Because
Skyrim.
as an artist, if you ask your fans what they want you to do next, they are always going to tell you that they want more of the same thing that you just did. Usually your most popular piece of work, whatever that is, because that's what they've formed attachments to. So in something like Skyrim and, Oblivion and Morrowind and whatever, phenomenal soundtracks, people have huge nostalgia attachments to that, and all they want is more of that. And I don't find that interesting. So like, the only way I would do Elder Scrolls 6 is if there was like, clear off the table, we're starting over. What do you think it should do? And I know that with how much money that franchise carries, there's no way they're going to give whoever does it that sort of creative freedom.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, they say Halo. We want you to do Halo. Now we got to have a little bit of the theme. The theme is what it is, but after that, you can run with it. Do you run to Halo, or do you run in the opposite direction for the same reasons that you just gave?
Something like that, I think I'd be more into. Battlefield, one of my favorite game series, is Battlefield being, I think, a prime example of that. Like, if you listen to Battlefield 1942 versus Battlefield 3 versus, like, Battlefield 3 and 4 are pretty similar, I would say, musically. They do have a pretty different vibe, but like, instrumentation wise, they're very much the same. But then you listen to like Battlefield 1 soundtrack and Battlefield 5 and then Battlefield 2042, recognizable themes, like the Battlefield title song is always the same melodic movement, but there's different takes on it. And I think I'd be into that. Like, if I got the next Battlefield game, hell yeah. As long as like the title theme is kind of where the expectations end. But I love that the title themes of the Battlefield games, and even Halo, is a really, really good example of that. Like, if you listen to Combat Evolved, like the OG Halo game, versus like Halo Reach, the title theme and stuff, like, it's still there. We can all go like, oh, that's the Halo song. But it's really different interpretations of that. And I think that that's cool, because you respect the universe and the thing, but everything after that is just, that's this game, And I think that's cool. It's like Battlefield 1, we have the Battlefield song at the start. The rest of the soundtrack is absolutely fantastic and has very little relation to anything that was established in Battlefield 4,
Good deal. Good deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about around the music that we haven't asked you yet, or we haven't thought to ask? Yeah.
Interesting tidbits from the music. Not that I could really think of offhand, but it's also like, I've been so close to this project that like nothing from it is interesting to me because I did it. Where it's like, yeah, that was cool. I think it was really fun to play with a lot of more experimental things in this. There was a lot of times where I played with weird ideas throughout the soundtrack. There was one session I did where I had my ukulele out and I had a microphone dangling from the cable, just like looping in a circle like that, because I just nudged it and let it go loose and weird and just recorded stuff with it. And it made this really interesting sound. And I think that was a really cool thing that happened, that I didn't end up using anything from that session, but that was a really fun experiment. And there's lots of stuff in the score that's weird like that. In Fort Northreach, you'll first hear it. The Dream Scourge bass is the sound I called it, where there's this double bass sound that's like, and it's this really kind of gnarly articulation. And I thought that was fun because Carrie Patel, the touch point for most of the game was Annihilation, the movie. I'm sure y'all have seen that. And Annihilation is a very synth-heavy soundtrack. And obviously a bunch of synthesizer stuff in Avowed would have been a decision. Like, it would have been really weird. And I don't think people would have liked it. But that was a question to me that I thought was really fun to constantly ask myself, is how would I make the Annihilation soundtrack acoustically? And what types of sounds can I make from organic sources that still feel like they fit in this universe, that are things that are not possible at all? Like, I couldn't ask a flute player to do that sound, because it's just not a sound a flute can make, but you can still hear that it is a flute thing. And that was one of the hard parts, because I really, really wanted to work with a live orchestra on this score, and Ryan Warden and I were, really trying to make that happen. But unfortunately, with the timeline it was produced on, there's just, booking a studio and an orchestra and a conductor and an arranger and all that can take years in some cases, depending on what studio you're working with. So in this case, there was a lot of fun stuff with that of, okay, if I have to use sample libraries, sampled string instruments and things like that, and I have to play the lead lines here myself, because I have, a cello and a violin and a viola and all the, instruments and toys floating about here. If I can only use what I have access to, how can I start using that as a creative advantage rather than a restriction? So that was kind of a fun thing to ask, where there's a lot of stuff in the soundtrack that I don't think we would have been able to do had we used a live orchestra, because it would have just been so time consuming and so difficult to replicate live. And I don't think it would have turned out the same way it did. And I thought that was kind of a fun idea that emerged a lot throughout the process of, okay, if I have to break this rule and this convention in soundtracks and like fantasy game soundtracks specifically, since that rule is already broken by the restrictions that have been imposed on me, what is another interesting take on that I could explore? And there was even stuff where the studio told me like, hey, it shouldn't use synthesizers and stuff because it's a fantasy game. And I was like, okay. And then I totally went out and used synthesizers and stuff, because it was like, okay, so if I'm not allowed to do this, how can I do that? And they won't know. So there's stuff like one of the examples I've given is in like Paradise, which all of you have played, right? The city. There's a couple instruments in that song, the like, it kind of sounds like a sitar sort of thing. It's not real at all. That's a completely computer generated model of an instrument. And it was a really fun question to ask of, like, we talked about finding the sound of the living lands and whatever. It was always a question of like, if I went to a concert here and I was like a person in Aora and I went to somewhere, what types of instruments would they have? And what, what melodies would they be playing and things like that? And that was a really important thing, was to try and develop a sense of culture in the score that felt very immersive and in world, because no matter what I did, it couldn't be immersion breaking. Because I think we've all had that, where like, kind of like Panda pointed out, when a game soundtrack is really, really good, all we do is enjoy it.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's because it's very transparent. And it's the same way with like voice acting or sound effects in games. When it's good, you just don't really notice it. You just kind of go like, yeah, it sounded good and the music was good, whatever. But if anything is wrong with it, that's the first thing you pick out on, of like, that voice actor was weird, or like, why did the dialogue sound like that? Or when I shoot that gun and the thing explodes, it doesn't sound like that. That sound doesn't sound like that. That's weird. So there was some fun opportunities there to be like, okay, if I can't have live players and whatever, what's a sound I could make that is impossible, that would only exist here? So with that, I was using physical modeling synthesizer instruments to combine different layers of different sound generation methods of like plucking things and, resonances and chambers and stuff like that, to build an instrument that I feel like someone in the city of Paradise would have made based on kind of the technology we can see that they have in the market. And, they've built pretty intricate buildings, and they obviously have access to metal shaping tools and woodworking tools and very fine detail, ornate bits of construction on like whatever that building is, like the church when you first walk in there, and the fountain has some kind of ornate details. So we can assume that they would build probably more elaborate, guitar, violin type instruments. So what's an instrument that might exist here, and how would you perform that? And that was a really fun thing to explore. And there's lots of weird stuff like that on the score, where there's certain instruments I'm using that are not real at all, including the more traditional instruments. So there's in the Emerald Stair song, actually, in Soil Song, when those lead violins and stuff come in like a minute and a half into the song or something like that, it's not a real violin whatsoever. And I thought that that was so cool because I have the option to record with a real violin. I have one right over there. But what if I don't? And like I could use a sample library, sure. But what if I don't? What does that sound like? And, some people probably don't like it. I thought it was cool. And I think that that's a really fun part of the creative process is finding the ideas that you're obsessed with and then making them as big as possible. And that was a really, fun bit throughout the scores. There's kind of, I don't know, has anyone here completed the game all the way through yet?
I have.
It's Nero.
Okay.
It's
So
Nero.
Nero's gotten through to the end, so I guess you'll probably understand this the most, but the idea with the music was that the closer you get to the end of the game, the weirder everything becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted the music to do that too. So when we start out in Dawnshore, it's pretty orchestral-y. It definitely has the Living Lands sound to it, which was really, really important because I thought of when I was making all the character themes, the Living Lands is a character in the game. It's not an observable person we converse with, but it is a character, so that had to be in there. And just like the Envoys theme and Inquisitor Ludwine has a theme and all this stuff, it's an orchestral song that sounds like the Living Lands version of that. But then, as we get into Emerald Stair, it starts to get a little weirder. And there's some other instruments and sounds in there that feel very unconventional and a lot of like different textures and stuff. And then Panda, you're in Gallowayne's Tusks, right? So you've done Shatterscarp too, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so Shatterscarp has a very different vibe that starts to get away from almost Western music in general. Like the way that the harmonies and melodies flow in there, it's got orchestral moments, but it's also got very drone moments that kind of flutter around a certain tone. And then by the time you get into Gallowayne's Tusks, I'm almost leaving Western music theory entirely. In that we're starting to just think of things as if this is the tone at the center of everything, whatever's on top could be major or minor at any time. And I can change that on the fly. And if I change then the center tone, how could that move around that? Because I'm getting away from the rules we normally set with ourselves in, oh, this song is in the key of B minor. So again, it raises, I think, the most interesting question. What if I didn't think about the key? What if a key could be both major and minor and borrow from other keys all at the same time? What could that do? And then by the time we get into the next region that you'll find, which is right before the end game starts, very, very different cue that even starts to just go out of time and tempo altogether. And that was really, really important because it's trying to inform the player on some level diegetically and in universe. What does this place sound like and why?
But
And
see, it was hard for me. Now that you pointed it out, like the music got more wackier and crazier towards the end. I couldn't tell if it was because of what you just pointed out or if it was because like all my crazy evil decisions was finally catching up to me.
But see, that's the art of it, because that was also the question I had to ask. Because as the composer, I do not know what your playthrough is like. I know the decisions you can make. I know the different endings that you can get. I know, how these things all come together, but I don't know which one you're going to get. And when we're playing, especially RPG games, like, being big into like Fallout and stuff myself and Elder Scrolls and all that, obviously, I know how much I self-insert and project myself onto my avatar within the game world. And we all do that, right? Like we spend hours in these character creators making the perfect person that's going to be our person that we're going to play as. So whatever we bring in our life experience, like in whatever age we are and whatever games we've played and whatever, we're going to read a lot of ourself into that game playthrough, whether we're going to be the good archetype, the bad archetype, or more of a morally gray person. So how do I make music that suits any of those scenarios, that is on beat, I guess, enough to fit where the narrative is in the game, but still ambiguous enough to where you can apply your life, like your real life and your self-insertion as your avatar within the game world, to where it feels like it fits whatever you're doing, no matter what choice you're making. That's a super, super, super hard thing to do. And I think that's where, especially a lot of Western games feel like they've gotten a bit more lazy
Yeah.
with, where I feel like soundtracks in a lot of, especially bigger budget games, and I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing it's because a lot of audio stuff kind of happens at more towards the end of things, and music, especially in my experience, feels like, hey, we've got a year before we ship. It's time to add the music now. And a lot of games, it just feels like it's sort of thrown over the top, and I don't like that. I don't like when you could take the soundtrack from one game and put it over gameplay of a different game and go, yeah,
It works.
that's probably what it is. And with Avowed, I hope at least there's just not another universe where this works, because it would feel off. And I think that's, not to like give myself credit, but I think that's the mark for me of what good game music is it is so innately tied to your experience within that universe that you can't hear it anywhere else. And I think that's where we form those deeper attachments with our gameplay experience and our experience with that soundtrack. Like if I hear the Halo theme, that takes me back to like drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza at 2 a.m, playing Halo and telling my friend that I banged his mom or whatever. That, like that gameplay and that song and that thing instantly take me back to that. Whereas a lot of other stuff sort of has started to feel kind of cookie cutter, and I don't think that it's interesting. And I hope to see more people take on more interesting things with that. I think, like I said, Dying Light 2 for me has just been the benchmark so far, at least, of like, wow, that's a really good example of what game music should be.
I'm so happy you keep bringing that game up, dude, because for me, that game has had a journey. I'm not sure if you've been on the entire journey that it's had.
I just got it recently, and I only got it because there's a fantastic series of videos on YouTube from the composer, actually, that talks about the music system. And I think it raises a great point, too, kind of like I talked about with audio being a later stage thing in some productions, where he talks about the idea of like, he's not interested in like writing music. He's interested in designing music systems. And that's something that I think you really can only do if you're brought on early enough in production to where the gameplay and stuff has been established enough to where we know what the game is, but it hasn't been locked to such an on-rails experience that the music just has to be sort of like, thrown on top of it, where we could say like, well, when does music come in and why? And what ways could it branch and twist and be different? And I hope to see more people explore that. And I think even Elden Ring is probably a good example of that, where like the Dark Souls and Elden Ring soundtracks are obviously very highly regarded, but musically they're very minimalist and kind of weird, and there's not a lot of theming in them most of the time. Like some themes are in there, but sometimes it's just kind of this amorphous texture of like music stuff, but it fits so insanely well. And I think that that's a really, really cool thing that I just have not experienced in a lot of, major AAA Western game studio titles.
Because I review games here on the channel, right? And I got the review for Avowed up. That's one of the reasons why I'm the only person on the channel that finished it. I wanted to get a review out within the early access, but I'm definitely going to come back to this and use some of what you said for Dying Light 2. And the reason I love that you keep mentioning it is because that game has came a long way within the 2 to 3 years it's been out. Even just simple things like the performance, the different lighting modes, that's one of the games that just keep getting better with time. So you definitely coming in at a really great time. But even with me being there day one, it was lacking a few things, like just options as far as, on consoles, we didn't have a 60 FPS mode, or, the performance mode resolution wasn't there where it should be. So, but now it is in such a great place. I want to revisit it. They added a bunch of free DLC, a bunch of free outfits and stuff you can download. So great game. I'm really happy you're enjoying that, because music was definitely one of the highlights. And the way you can change the color grading in the game to
Yeah,
me
I thought
is
that was kind of
amazing.
cool too because
Yeah,
I saw that sort of hidden in the menu, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of neat. I don't have to play it this way. I could turn it this way and whatever." And there was
hmm
wasn't there like a weird black and white mode that was like super high contrast or
yep,
something?
yep, yep. Dark
That
and
made
gritty,
playing
and
at
yeah.
night horrifying, and I
Oh
loved
yeah,
it.
oh yeah.
But
um,
yeah, that was a good one. And I think the next one I'm looking forward to playing when I have the time is Days Gone. I just got that on the Steam winter sale, I
The
think. And
remaster coming out, man.
yeah, Days Gone, I think I played the first maybe 30-ish minutes of the game, and then I had to set it down because I was like, this is a game I need a long weekend to just
hmm
sit down and experience kind of all in one go. Like, I feel like it's going to be way better served that way. But just even the first, half hour or whatever I played of
That
that game
game
was
is
like,
very near and dear to my heart, man, because I feel like it got a very bad rep, but everything from that game, like the pacing to begin, like you said, you definitely got to sit down and dedicate some time to it. But once you hit a certain point in the story, the game is just going to start flying by because you're going to be so
that's
immersed.
what I figured because it came across pretty early on that like, okay, this is going to be a really good gaming experience, and I need to just have that. I don't want to play this in little chunks at night because I feel like that's probably
Definitely.
why I like the Battlefield series so much. Is it's rare I have like deep time to dedicate to gaming, so it's nice to have games so I could pull it up for 40 minutes and play a couple matches and then
Do me a favor,
be
man. I
done.
want you to think about your boy NextGenNero, Aim Down Sight podcast, right? When you get to this certain point, and I know you from Illinois, I know you're tired of the cold winters and stuff like this, but I'm from Buffalo, New York. We close to Canada. Go Bills. Shout out Josh Allen. But this part was just, and you're going to know this part, but it's a part probably about 60, 70% way through the game. And you're driving through the mountains, and this actual song start playing, and the vibes is so immaculate. The music, the everything about why you're doing what you're doing in that moment is highlighted through the music. It is just such a vibe. That's what made me have to redo my review recently because I'm like, yo, that is just beautiful. It's getting a remastered soon and some updates, new content coming. So shout out Days Gone, man. But when you
Well, I
get to
guess
that
that's
part, you're gonna know. You're gonna know. You can be like, this is what he was talking about.
maybe that's a good question to end on with the theme of this whole thing. I would be curious to know for the three of you, unless that was yours, Nero. What is like the gaming plus music moment for you that it was just like everything hit where you're like, damn, that's excellent.
Personally, I'm gonna say most recently, definitely Death Stranding. I played the hell out of Death Stranding on my PS4 Pro. It's one of the last few games I pre-ordered years before the last generation ended, and it's multiple moments throughout that game where you overcome a mountain, and it's just a vast, beautiful scenery. So as far as the eye can see, and it's just a music. It's just those that and Days Gone, that specific song I told you about, that is what made me go start looking up soundtracks to video games.
Really,
Prior to that, I
that's
wasn't
a pretty
really,
that's a pretty ringing endorsement because
yeah.
that's what I'm always interested in too. Is like, what is a game that made you look up a soundtrack? Because I think that's such a critical moment for a lot of gaming people. Is like that's the one where you know that like that game just hit different and it's going to be super important the rest of your life. I even saw that on something where I don't know if it was on my Instagram or something, but I saw a comment where someone's kid or something was playing the game and they're like, "Yeah, it's really good. It's like it's as good as Elden Ring." And I was like, "Damn, that kid's cool." Like,
That kid
oh,
gets it.
and I'm hoping that my soundtrack is the one where they go and look it up because there was a comment on some YouTube video. Someone you know how people like take the music out of the game and post it on YouTube. One of them, someone put up. Someone said as soon as I heard the title theme, I had to go look up the soundtrack to this game, and I was like, "My guy, all right, thank you."
I will say you're in that you're in the three though, because it's only three games that have ever looked up the soundtrack for it. Granted, I knew that I had this interview coming, but even then, still, the music in the world of Avowed was so good. I was in this trance where it was hard to just focus on the music because everything came together so well.
Well,
So
good.
I
Really
was
glad to hear it.
immersed. And I would have to force myself to just sit back and look at some of the vistas and the later spots with the lava and stuff flowing and just enjoy the vibes and stuff like that. So personally, Avowed, uh, Days Gone, and Death Stranding, man. Those is the three. That's three really good. That's good. to be in there, man. Congrats to you, man. That's huge,
Oh,
bro.
thank you.
Because that's amazing, bro. Congrats, and I appreciate you.
So,
To
yeah.
to quickly and then I mean quickly to quickly answer your question, lyric man, you beat me to the punch. I was thinking the same thing, Red Dead Redemption 2, and I was thinking Unshaken.
Mm.
Yo, fire, fire. That would be something that yeah. I kind of reflect on all the time. I was just talking to a buddy of mine. We were talking about Red Dead today, and we were talking about how good the music is and how it just sets the tone for the entire game all the way through. So that would be probably one that I would come to mind right now. I'm huge into the Indiana Jones franchise, the whole IP period. So
Mm.
that was really, really well done. I mean, I just felt
There's a
like I
new
felt like a kid again in that
The Golden
playing that
Circle.
game.
there's a new
Yeah.
game too, isn't there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, yeah. If you're an Indiana Jones fan, if you are,
Oh
then
yeah,
it
yeah. I watched
is.
the movies all the time as a kid.
Oh
I
no,
I
well,
saw just recently something about a new Indiana
hey,
Jones game, and I was
Yeah.
like,
go
oh,
go
cool.
go watch this movie
It's
because
available
that's
on
what
Steam.
you. It's in Game Pass. uh,
Hmm.
go watch this movie because you feel like you're playing it, like you're in a movie. It's
Okay.
very well done. That was a magical thing there, and then just like I said, I already spoke about it. Hogwarts. That was just.
Hmm.
It was really good. It's really good. So yeah. And Indy's really well done. I think you're gonna like
Mm.
Indy. I think you're gonna like it, and I think you're gonna love the choice of them using first person. I know that's not with the
Hmm.
music, but just I think you're gonna enjoy it. It's gonna bring you into a different way that third person uh, typically doesn't. So it was very well done. But that Indiana Jones, man, it's like a movie. So, but hey, Panda, what
And
about you?
you're part, not just real quick, you're part of a really good historic streak right now as far as first party games
Mhm.
being pumped out from Xbox. Like Avowed is just a cherry on top. And I got criticized for being upset about Avowed being delayed into this year because that was one of my most anticipated games I was looking forward to playing last year. So I was a little let down, but it was definitely worth the wait. And now
I think it was.
understanding
I think it was a
it
good
definitely
choice to
was,
delay
and
it. It
especially with
wasn't.
knowing that you did all you did in 8 months. That is extremely impressive. And now I'm like, okay, I get
Mhm.
the delay. So you're part of a historic streak right now. Indiana Jones is fantastic. Avowed is one of the best RPGs we've gotten. Is in my opinion, is Obsidian best work. Period. And that's because the Pillars of Eternity universe is something they've built. Fallout New Vegas, for as
Mm.
great as it was, that was just a branch off of what Bethesda already had going on. So for this to be their own baby right here that they built, just like the Outer Worlds, to me, I gotta give it the edge over New Vegas. But man, a fantastic game, man.
Mm.
Absolutely killed it. But go ahead, Panda. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
You're okay. You're okay. What were you going to say about the delay piece there? I feel like you were going to say something,
Oh
Venus.
yeah, no, I remember when the delay ended up happening, and it really was because they just wanted to like polish things up even further, and I'm glad they did because it wasn't in like a bad state whatsoever when that decision was made. But it was nice to see because I think that to me, just like being more of like in gamer brain mode, was such a cool decision to see that being made of like we know we can do a little bit better, so we're gonna delay like one of the largest games coming out right now just to add that extra like 1% of stuff that like probably most people wouldn't even notice, especially in the gaming environment we're now where I feel like I'm sure you guys have had this too where I've paid $60 for a game and then I download it and I'm like, this is garbage. Like this
Should have
is
waited.
this is a $60 advertisement to buy more stuff that doesn't even work.
Yep.
So yeah, seeing Avowed and playing it and writing the score for it and knowing how good of a state it was in, just to see them be like, yeah, we could add more. We could
Mm.
tweak this. We could do one more thing here that will just elevate it just a tiny bit more. And yeah, I think they nailed it. Like I think the game is awesome. It's a little slow at first, but I
Mhm.
feel like that's most kind of like RPG games. Just you have to. It's like every TV series where the first 2 or 3 episodes you kind of just gotta deal
The
with like
world
the narrative
building and
dumps and
yeah.
whatever just to get to know the characters, and then from there it's like it just nails it.
But I feel like that's most great RPGs, and that's kind of why I hate how people pick and choose which ones they want to point out. As much as I'm loving Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, that's a slow build. Baldur's Gate 3 is a very slow build. Starfield is the fastest built in the Bethesda mainline game, arguably, but that's a slow build. You still got to mine a few rocks. So it's like, great games and great RPGs. You got to build this beautiful world
Mass
up a
Effect
little bit.
1's a
Man.
slow
So,
build
yeah.
for the most part, yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, I think Mass Effect 3.
That's a good one.
I feel like each game has, like, yes, builds up on the choices that you make, and you can definitely feel the intensity of what 3 is going to be, where everything kind of comes together, and like what happens with Mordin, and the choice you make, and just like the emotional beats of the music in that game. Just, I don't know, it just sat with me to my core, and like I love these characters, and I was like crying when things were going wrong, and I was just like, there were just so many things where like the music came together in such a way that you felt the levity of what they were trying to do in that game, and it was beautiful. And it's one of my favorite gaming franchises, and I look forward to N7 Day every year, just in case there's something spoilery or merch I can get. But yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of say I really appreciate you being here, Venus Theory.
Yeah, absolutely.
I listened to the soundtrack before I got a chance to play the game, and I listened to it about 3 or 4 times, and I was like, I'm going to stop listening to it because I really just want to see where this music actually shows up in game,
Right.
and then kind of look at it from the, does it tonally suit what is happening in the game? And it definitely did. And
I'll be curious when you get to the
end,
the return, that track. Like,
yeah.
I'm sure you've heard it on the soundtrack. It's from a cutscene, I'll tell you that much. But I'll be curious if you had the same reaction I did when that cutscene happens, where you're just like, yeah.
Okay. I'll look out for it. But
you're getting close to it.
I am.
Pretty
I'm
close
so
to
close.
that part of the game.
There's been so many things in this. I'm like, what? I wasn't expecting that. Okay, they keep surprising me, and they keep just leveling up around like I don't know how to describe it, but I'm just thoroughly enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the other gaming moments. No Man's Sky. Did anyone here play that one?
No, I just picked it up though.
Okay. Yeah, I was an idiot and bought No Man's Sky, did the pre-order thing, and then the game launched and it was like nothing was actually in the game. But yeah, when you like get the first spaceship and get to go out and you hear the soundtrack from 65 Days of Static, and there's just this like epic ambient cue as you kind of go out into the wormhole of space. That's a moment that just like hits.
Yeah.
I think the first game though that really made me look up game soundtracks was Primal. This is a pretty old game. I don't know if anyone here played it. Primal on PlayStation 2, if anyone remembers that at all. Yeah, it's a very weird game. I don't even think it was very successful. I think it got really bad reviews. But yeah, that was like one of the first ones where the music was so atmospheric that I don't even think YouTube existed back then. Maybe it did. Or maybe it was in its really, really early days. But I remember putting that game on just so I could have the music going. So it was that weird like PlayStation 2 era thing where your character is just kind of doing the weird standing animation. Because I don't know, like that's what characters in games did back then. And you're in this like weird empty room and just listening to the soundtrack there. And then Grand Theft Auto 5. There's one of the songs on the radio. It's a remix of a Cascade song, and it's like a slowed remix or whatever. I can't remember the song title, but that was another like recent peak gaming moment for me, of like driving to the top of like the mountain in the game, and that slowed down version of that song hits. Like, that's a whole mood.
Nice.
Don't think Primal existed. Oh, Shadow of the Colossus is great.
Shadow of that's a good game. I'm mindful we have gone over, and I didn't want to hold you hostage knowing what time it was.
All good.
Go have something to eat. But I just want to say thank you so much. We'll just do a bit of a quick closeout and let everyone know where they can find us. I'm going to start with you, Venus. Where can people find you if they're interested in following on your career and journey?
You can just Google Venus Theory and something will probably come up. I have my YouTube channel also under Venus Theory. I have my Bandcamp where I release my music. also under Venus Theory. I'm on social media as Venus Theory. I don't really get on there and post much, but you can follow me there too if you like. And then the Avowed soundtrack, for those of you who haven't heard it, it is out on all the streaming things, whichever one you feel so inclined to use.
Thank you. Nero, where can people avoid you?
NextGenNero, all platforms, man. YouTube, NextGenNero, Twitter, Blue Sky, all one word, man. If we want unbiased reviews from real gamers that actually care about the games and are passionate about it, then come tune in to your boy
Go to
and
Soul's
right
channel
here
if
on
you
the
want
channel
that.
as
You're not
well.
going to get it from Nero. I'm kidding.
Come to my channel if you want unbiasedness. You want to hear about the great PlayStation games? I got you. Great Xbox games? I got you. Go to Panda if you just want to hear about Nintendo stuff.
See, I'm blocking Nero on everything now because I want my reviews bought and paid for. So I'm
Exactly.
Blue Sky too. I'm going to make a Blue Sky account and block you there, so I don't have to deal with that.
That's funny. That is funny.
So, what about yourself?
Yeah, hey, thanks again for joining us. This has been a lot of fun, man. Your energy was great. You did a great job just answering all of the questions and going a little bit further and above and beyond, especially with the ones that were just really random for me. I like the randomness, man, but it was really awesome, man. I'm glad you didn't just kind of say pass with those questions. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
what an interview that would have been. Just every question, no.
No, man, and I absolutely love it, man, because I could have foregone all those questions and got really into the you and the why behind you, but you got into a lot of that as well, so that was really great to experience that. So thank you for giving us the opportunity, and thank you for dropping by and entertaining and educating our chat, our faithful chat, man. I believe they really did enjoy this interview, man. You gave us some great insight, and it's nice to put a face and a voice behind a great piece of work. And I think you've given us a great piece of work that's going to be long standing. I hope that if not Microsoft or just Obsidian themselves, somebody reaches back out to you to give you other opportunities and kind of give you a space where you can be you, the you that has created this wonderful piece of work that we all are enjoying right now. So thank you so very much for your time and your energy tonight.
Yeah, thanks. I hope they reach out too. I have this habit where I like to have, food and a house and stuff. So it'd be great to have more work so I can make money to exist.
It is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And then, of course, guys, you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, Blue Sky, all that. I got soul. Guys, I am there. I do more scrolling than anything else, and every once in a while, I do like to engage with everyone. But you can find me there. You can avoid me there. You can, like, retweet, whatever you want to do, any of the foolishness that I do take a part of every once in a while. So that's where you guys can find me. And thank you for joining us again here on Aim Down Sights.
Thank you. All right, we're going to head on out. I'll very quickly say you can find me on X. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me on Xbox because I'll be probably quickly getting a snack and then jumping on Avowed for the rest of the afternoon.
I bet you'll hit the cutscene if you play through it for a bit tonight. You should get there within a couple hours, based on where you're at.
We shall see, because I'm meticulous and I will go through every little thing like a fine-tooth comb, looking for everything. So it's been a slow progress getting to where I've got to right now. But I'm hoping that I'll get there tonight, and I'm hoping that I'll hear that. And I want to see if I have that reaction too. So again, thank you each and everyone, my co-hosts, our chat, everything like that. And again, Venus Theory, thank you once again. You've been fantastic. We're going to close out the show. We will be not back next week. There are two of us who have other commitments next weekend. And so we'll be back the week after. And the week after that, when we do come back, we will have Web Dave on the show. So yeah, it'll be a good show, good vibe. Everyone, please look after yourselves. Enjoy playing Avowed. Enjoy the soundtrack, and have a good night. Yeah. Bye, everyone.